For millennia, in the depths of the legendary Library of Alexandria, wise custodians guarded sacred knowledge that could transform any human being into an unlimited version of themselves. This knowledge, lost in the flames that consumed the library, contained the most powerful keys to awakening the true power of the I Am, the creative force that resides in the heart of human consciousness. Now, through a synthesis of quantum science and ancestral wisdom, these sacred keys are revealed once again. This audiobook is more than a personal transformation guide. It is an initiatory journey that reconnects you with your original divine nature, the one you always knew was possible, but which was covered by layers of conditioning and limiting beliefs. You will discover how ancient masters used specific techniques of mental reprogramming and vibrational elevation to manifest impossible realities. You will learn to apply these same keys in your modern life, combining cutting-edge neuroscience with timeless spiritual principles. Each chapter reveals a different sacred key, guiding you through a transformation process that begins in the subconscious mind and expands to all dimensions of your existence. This is not just a book about manifestation. It is an invitation to awaken the dormant divinity within you and reclaim your power as a conscious creator of reality. Chapter 1. The Awakening of the Forgotten Creator. The first sacred key, recognition of inner divinity. There is a moment in every soul's journey when the veil between who you think you are and who you truly are becomes so thin that it practically dissolves. For most people, this moment comes disguised as a crisis, a loss, or a deep dissatisfaction that no external achievement can fill. But what if I told you that this moment isn't a breakdown? It's actually a breakthrough. What if this restlessness you feel, this knowing that there's so much more to you than what you're currently living, isn't a problem to be solved, but a divine invitation to be answered? You see, there's something extraordinary happening to you right now, even as you listen to these words. Your consciousness, that eternal, infinite aspect of who you are, is beginning to remember what the ancient keepers of Alexandria knew thousands of years ago. You are not merely a human being having spiritual experiences. You are an immortal, divine being having a temporary human experience. Let me share with you the story of Sarah, a woman who discovered this truth in the most unexpected way. Sarah was a successful corporate executive, someone who had achieved everything society told her would make her happy. Corner office, six-figure salary, beautiful home, perfect family on paper. Yet every morning, she woke up with a weight in her chest that no accomplishment could lift. She felt like she was living someone else's life, wearing a mask that had become so heavy, she couldn't remember what her real face looked like underneath. One evening, after another day of feeling completely disconnected from herself, Sarah found herself standing in her bathroom, looking at her reflection in the mirror, but instead of seeing the tired, stressed woman she expected, something extraordinary happened. For just a moment, a fleeting, magical moment, she saw beyond the physical form. She saw light. She saw infinite possibility. She saw a being of such magnificence that her logical mind immediately tried to dismiss it as imagination or fatigue. But her heart knew better. Her heart recognized what her mind had forgotten. She was looking at her true self for the first time in years. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Not because she was anxious, but because she was electric with possibility. She had touched something real, something that made everything else in her life feel like a pale shadow by comparison. She had glimpsed the creator that lived within her, the aspect of consciousness that had always been there, waiting patiently for recognition. This is the first sacred key that was guarded in the halls of Alexandria. Recognition of inner divinity. It's the understanding that within your human form exists an unlimited creative force that is literally connected to the same intelligence that moves the stars, grows the trees, and beats your heart without your conscious effort. Now let me be clear about something crucial. When I speak of your divinity, I'm not talking about some abstract spiritual concept that sounds nice but has no practical application. I'm talking about a measurable, observable, scientifically verifiable phenomenon. Modern neuroscience has discovered that when individuals truly recognize their unlimited nature, when they shift from identification with the limited self to recognition of the infinite self, their brain patterns change dramatically. Areas associated with self-imposed limitations literally decrease in activity. while regions connected to creativity, intuition, and expanded awareness become significantly more active. But the ancient Alexandrians knew this thousands of years before we had machines to measure it. They understood that the moment a person truly recognizes their divine nature, everything changes. Not eventually. Not after years of practice. Immediately. Think about this for a moment. Every single limitation you experience in your life exists only because you've agreed to it. Every boundary, that's just not possible for me. I'm not the type of person who exists only in the space between who you think you are and who you actually are. The divine being within you knows no such limitations. It never has and never will. I want you to consider something that might challenge everything you've been taught about personal growth and transformation. What if you don't need to become anything other than what you already are? What if the answer isn't to add more knowledge, more techniques, more strategies to your already overloaded life? What if the answer is to subtract, to remove the layers of false identity that have been covering up your true nature like dust on a diamond? The Alexandrian masters had a saying, "The sculptor doesn't create the statue. The statue already exists within the stone. The sculptor simply removes everything that isn't the statue." This is exactly what happens when you apply the first sacred key. You're not trying to become divine. You already are divine. You're simply removing everything that isn't aligned with that truth. Now here's where it gets interesting from a practical standpoint. When you truly recognize your divine nature, your relationship with everything changes. You stop approaching life from a place of lack, need, or limitation. Instead, you begin to approach life from a place of abundance, creativity, and infinite possibility. You stop asking, "How can I get what I want?" and start asking, "What wants to be created through me?" This shift in perspective isn't just philosophical, it's neurological. When you operate from recognition of your divine nature, your brain literally rewires itself. The neural pathways associated with fear, scarcity, and limitation begin to weaken from lack of use, while new pathways associated with confidence, creativity, and expanded awareness become stronger and more dominant. Let me give you another example. Remember Marcus, a struggling artist who had spent years believing that creativity was something that happened to him rather than through him. Marcus would sit for hours waiting for inspiration to strike, frustrated when it didn't come, celebrating when it did, but always feeling like he was at the mercy of forces beyond his control. Everything changed the day Marcus realized something profound. He wasn't separate from creativity. He was creativity in human form. The same intelligence that painted the sunset was the intelligence looking through his eyes. The same force that composed symphonies in nature was the force moving through his hands when he held a brush. From that moment forward, Marcus never experienced creative block again. Not because he became more talented or learned new techniques, but because he stopped trying to access creativity from outside himself and started recognizing the creative force that was his very essence. This is the power of the first sacred key. It doesn't give you access to your divine nature. It awakens you to the recognition that you never lost it in the first place. But here's what I've discovered after working with thousands of people on this journey. Intellectual understanding isn't enough. You can read about your divine nature, think about it, even believe it conceptually, but until you feel it in every cell of your body, until you know it beyond any shadow of doubt, it remains just another interesting idea. The ancient Alexandrians understood this, which is why they developed specific practices to move this recognition from the mind into lived experience. They knew that transformation happens not when you think differently, but when you feel differently about who you are at the most fundamental level. So as you continue listening to these words, I want you to begin a gentle process of recognition, not trying to become something new, but remembering something eternal. Start by simply acknowledging this truth. The consciousness that is aware of these words, the awareness that is experiencing this moment, that consciousness is not limited by your name, your age, your gender, your job title, or any other label you've accepted about yourself. That consciousness, pure, unlimited, creative awareness, is who you really are. Everything else is just clothing you've put on for this particular human experience. Feel into this truth. Don't analyze it, don't judge it, don't try to figure out how it works. Simply feel into the possibility that you are so much more vast, so much more powerful, so much more creative than you've been allowing yourself to experience. This is your natural state. This recognition isn't something you achieve. It's something you return to. It's something you remember. It's something you allow. And as you allow this recognition to settle into your being, notice what happens. Notice how your breathing might naturally deepen. Notice how your body might relax in ways you didn't even realize it was tense. Notice how problems that seemed overwhelming a few minutes ago might suddenly seem less daunting, not because they changed, but because your perspective of who's facing them has expanded. This is just the beginning. The first sacred key opens the door, but there are 9 more keys waiting to guide you into the full expression of your divine creative power. Each key builds upon the last, creating a complete system of transformation that the Alexandrian masters spent lifetimes perfecting. But for now, rest in this recognition. You are not a limited human being hoping to occasionally touch the divine. You are an unlimited divine being temporarily expressing yourself through human form. This isn't a metaphor. This isn't wishful thinking. This is the most practical, applicable truth you will ever encounter. As you carry this recognition with you into your daily life, watch what begins to shift. Watch how opportunities appear that weren't there before. Watch how solutions present themselves for challenges that seemed impossible. Watch how your very presence begins to affect the people and situations around you in ways that can only be described as miraculous. The Creator within you has been waiting patiently for this recognition. Now that the first sacred key has been turned, there's no going back to the old limited version of yourself. You've remembered who you really are, and that changes everything. The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that once this first key was activated, the rest would follow naturally, each one unlocking greater levels of creative power, deeper access to infinite wisdom, and more complete integration of heaven and earth through your unique human expression. Welcome home to yourself. The real journey has just begun. Chapter 2. The Alchemy of Sacred Breath. The second sacred key. The creative power of divine breath. Have you ever considered that the very first thing you did when you arrived in this world was breathe? And it will be the last thing you do before you depart. Between those 2 sacred breaths, the first and the final, lies your entire human experience. But what you may not realize is that every single breath between those 2 holy moments carries within it the potential to completely rewrite your reality. The ancient keepers of Alexandria understood something that our modern science is only beginning to rediscover. Breath is not merely an automatic biological process. It is the direct, tangible, measurable link between your limited human consciousness and the infinite quantum field of all possibilities. It is literally the breath of the divine flowing through you, carrying information, energy, and creative power that most people never learn to consciously access. Let me tell you about Elena, a woman who discovered this power in a way that transformed not only her life but the lives of everyone around her. Elena was a nurse in an oncology ward, a profession she loved deeply, but that also left her emotionally depleted. Day after day she witnessed suffering, loss, and pain. Gradually, her own energy field began absorbing these heavy vibrations until she found herself in a state of profound depression and physical exhaustion. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Elena sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, feeling completely drained. She closed her eyes and, without knowing why, began paying attention to her breath. She wasn't trying to do anything special, simply observing the air flowing in and out of her lungs. But something extraordinary happened. As she continued watching her breath, Elena began to feel that she wasn't the one doing the breathing. It was as if life itself was breathing through her. Each inhalation brought not just air, but a sensation of renewal, of possibility, of connection to something infinitely larger than her momentary problems. In that moment, Elena understood intuitively what the masters of Alexandria knew. Her breath was her direct line to the universal creative source, and if she could use this connection intentionally, consciously, she could transform not just her inner state but her outer reality as well. This is the second sacred key that was carved into the hidden stones of the lost library, the creative power of divine breath. The ancients understood that when you breathe consciously, with intention and reverence, You're not simply oxygenating your body, you're literally reorganizing your energetic signature and reprogramming your reality at the quantum level. Modern science confirms what the Alexandrians knew millennia ago. When you intentionally alter your breathing pattern, immediate and measurable changes occur in your nervous system, brain chemistry, and electromagnetic field. You literally become a different version of yourself with each conscious breath. But here's what makes this truly alchemical. Your breath doesn't just affect you, it affects the quantum field around you. Every exhalation releases not just carbon dioxide, but the energetic vibration of your thoughts and emotions in that moment. Every inhalation doesn't just bring oxygen, but draws back from the universe the quality of energy you're emanating. Think about this. You are literally co-creating your reality with every breath. If you breathe from a place of fear, anxiety, or limitation, you're instructing the quantum field to bring back more experiences that match that vibration. But if you breathe consciously from a place of gratitude, love, and infinite possibility, you're commanding the universe to reflect this new energetic signature back into your life. The masters of Alexandria developed specific understandings about how to use different breathing patterns for different creative purposes. They knew that breathing with certain intentions and rhythms could elevate your vibration until you literally tuned into future versions of yourself, versions that already exist in the quantum field, waiting for you to align energetically with them. Let me explain this in a way your logical mind can grasp, while your intuition recognizes the deeper truth. When you breathe consciously, several things happen simultaneously. First, you instantly shift from a state of survival to a state of creation. Conscious breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, taking you out of fight or flight mode and putting you into grow and thrive mode. In this state, your brain produces alpha and theta brainwaves, which are the same frequencies where creativity, intuition, and manifestation occur. Second, you synchronize your heart and brain into a state of coherence. This heart-brain coherence creates a much more powerful electromagnetic field around you, a field that literally attracts experiences that match your new vibration. Third, you activate what the ancients called the inner temple of creation, specific areas in your brain that connect directly with the quantum field of infinite possibilities. In this expanded state of consciousness, you can literally sense future versions of yourself and begin to energetically align with them. But perhaps most importantly, when you breathe consciously, you remember that you're not a separate being struggling against the universe. You are an extension of the universe itself, using human form to create conscious experiences. Your breath is the constant reminder of this sacred connection. Now let me share with you how Elena applied this understanding and the extraordinary results that followed. After that transformative experience in the parking lot, Elena began implementing what she intuitively understood about the power of conscious breathing. Every morning before entering the hospital, she would spend a few minutes in her car practicing what she called divine preparation breathing. She would inhale slowly, imagining she was breathing in light, love, and healing energy from the universe. Then she would gently hold the breath for a few seconds, allowing this divine energy to merge with her own essence. Then she would exhale slowly, sending this expanded energy throughout the entire hospital, to all the patients, staff, and families she would encounter that day. What happened over the following months can only be described as miraculous. First, Elena's own energy transformed completely. She not only recovered from her depression and exhaustion, but began radiating a presence that others described as calming and inspiring. Patients began specifically requesting to be cared for by her. Families commented on how much more hopeful they felt after spending time in her presence. But this was just the beginning. Elena began noticing that when she entered patient rooms while intentionally maintaining a breath of love and healing, measurable changes occurred. Blood pressure would stabilize. Pain levels would decrease. Even some test results showed improvements that doctors couldn't medically or scientifically explain. Elena wasn't doing anything other than being present and breathing consciously, but her conscious presence, sustained by intentional breathing, was literally elevating the energetic field around her and allowing healing possibilities that already existed in the quantum field to manifest in the physical world. This is the real alchemy of sacred breath. It doesn't just transform you, it transforms everything around you through the elevation of your vibrational signature. Now you might be wondering, how can I apply this in my own life? The beauty of the second sacred key is its simplicity and immediate applicability. You don't need special equipment, sacred locations, or years of training. You only need the willingness to bring consciousness to something you're already doing naturally. Breathing. Here's a fundamental understanding that will transform your experience. Every time you breathe consciously with a specific intention, you're literally sending a direct message to the quantum field about who you're choosing to be in that moment. The universe then responds by organizing people, events, and opportunities that match this new version of you. For example, if you're facing a challenge in your life, instead of breathing from the stress and limitation of that challenge, you can consciously breathe from the solution. Inhale deeply, imagining you're breathing in confidence, clarity, and wisdom. Hold for a few seconds, allowing these qualities to integrate into your being. Exhale slowly, releasing any tension, doubt, or fear related to the situation. When you do this consistently, something extraordinary happens. Your subconscious mind, which is responsible for 95% of your decisions and behaviors, begins operating from this new vibration. You naturally start noticing opportunities that previously went unnoticed. You feel inspired to take actions you would normally consider out of your reach. People and resources appear in your life in ways that seem synchronistic, but are actually the natural result of your new energetic signature. The Alexandrians had a phrase that perfectly captures this process. As you breathe, so you create. They understood that the pattern of your breathing reflects the pattern of your creation. Shallow, anxious breathing creates shallow, limited experiences. Deep, conscious, reverent breathing creates profound, expansive, extraordinary experiences. But here's something even deeper I want to share with you. Sacred breathing isn't just about manifesting specific things or experiences in your life. It's about aligning with the very creative process of the universe itself. It's about becoming a conscious participant in the cosmic dance of creation, rather than a passive observer waiting for life to happen to you. When you breathe consciously, you connect with the same power that makes stars shine, flowers bloom, and your heart beat. You become a channel for this infinite intelligence to express itself through your unique human form. And when this happens, your life becomes a constantly evolving work of art, a unique expression of divine creativity. Let me share another story that illustrates the profound practical applications of this sacred key. David was a business executive who had been struggling for months with a major decision that would affect not only his career, but his entire family's future. He had analyzed every angle, consulted with experts, created spreadsheets and projections, but still felt paralyzed by uncertainty. One evening, feeling completely overwhelmed, David remembered reading about the power of conscious breathing. He decided to try a simple experiment. Instead of approaching the decision from his usual place of mental analysis and worry, he would breathe into it from a place of trust and wisdom. David sat quietly and began breathing slowly and deeply. With each inhalation, he imagined drawing in clarity, wisdom, and divine guidance. With each exhalation, he released the need to control the outcome and the fear of making the wrong choice. He didn't try to think his way to the answer. He simply breathed into the space where the perfect solution already existed. After about 20 minutes of this conscious breathing, something remarkable happened. David didn't hear a voice or see a vision, but he felt a profound knowing settle into his being. The right path became crystal clear, not through mental analysis, but through direct knowing that bypassed his overthinking mind entirely. David followed this inner guidance, and the decision led to opportunities and successes beyond what his logical mind could have ever projected. But more importantly, he had discovered a way of making decisions and navigating life that connected him directly to a source of wisdom far greater than his personal knowledge and experience. This is what happens when you truly understand and apply the alchemy of sacred breath. You stop trying to figure out life with your limited personal mind and start accessing the infinite intelligence that flows through you with every conscious breath. The ancient Alexandrians knew that breath is the bridge between the seen and unseen worlds, between your human limitations and your divine unlimited nature. They developed specific breathing practices for different aspects of creation and transformation, understanding that the quality of your breathing directly determines the quality of your life experience. Here's another crucial understanding. Your breathing pattern is constantly communicating to your subconscious mind about what kind of reality you expect to experience. When you breathe shallowly from the chest, You're telling your nervous system that you're in danger, that resources are scarce, that you need to be on guard. Your subconscious then creates experiences that match this expectation. But when you breathe deeply and consciously from your lower abdomen, engaging what the ancients called the breath of the gods, you're signaling to every cell in your body that you are safe, abundant, and connected to unlimited resources. Your subconscious mind then goes to work creating experiences that align with this new instruction. This isn't metaphysical theory. This is measurable physiology. Conscious breathing immediately shifts your autonomic nervous system, changes your hormone production, and alters your brainwave patterns. You literally become a different person, operating from a different set of possibilities with each conscious breath. But perhaps the most profound aspect of sacred breathing is how it reconnects you to the present moment, the only place where creation actually occurs. Most people live their entire lives oscillating between regret about the past and anxiety about the future, never fully inhabiting the eternal now where their creative power resides. When you breathe consciously, you anchor yourself in the present moment, where you have access to the full spectrum of quantum possibilities. Past and future become simply reference points rather than prisons, and you discover that right here, right now, breathing consciously, you have the power to choose and create any reality you can envision and feel. The Alexandrian masters taught that there are actually multiple dimensions of breathing, each accessing different levels of creative power. Physical breathing oxygenates the body. Emotional breathing harmonizes your feeling states. Mental breathing clarifies your thoughts. But sacred breathing, breathing with full consciousness of your divine nature, opens you to what they called the breath of creation itself. When you access this level of conscious breathing, you're no longer just a human being who occasionally touches the divine. You become a divine being consciously expressing through human form, using your breath as the constant flow of creative energy between heaven and earth. As you continue to integrate this second sacred key into your daily life, notice how your relationship with breathing transforms. What was once automatic and unconscious becomes sacred and intentional. Each breath becomes an opportunity to consciously choose who you're being, what energy you're emanating, and what reality you're inviting into your experience. And remember, the ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this is only the second of 10 keys. As you master the alchemy of sacred breath, you're preparing your consciousness for the even deeper revelations that are yet to come. Each key builds upon the previous one, creating a transformation so complete that you will literally become unrecognizable to the person you were when you began this journey. Breathe consciously. Breathe intentionally. Breathe sacredly. And watch as the universe breathes a new reality back to you. The next sacred key awaits your mastery of this one. But for now, simply breathe and know that with each conscious breath you are reclaiming your birthright as a creator of your own extraordinary reality. Chapter 3. The Inner Temple of Manifestation. The third sacred key. Building the sacred space of creation. What if I told you that within your mind exists a sacred temple more powerful than any physical structure ever built? A space where miracles are conceived before they're born into the world. A sanctuary where you can commune directly with the creative forces of the universe and literally architect your future reality. This isn't mystical fantasy. This is the most practical truth you'll ever encounter. The ancient masters of Alexandria understood something that modern science is only beginning to validate. Your inner mental landscape isn't just a collection of thoughts and memories. It's a living, breathing, creative environment that directly interfaces with the quantum field of infinite possibilities. When you learn to consciously construct and inhabit this inner temple, you gain access to manifestation powers that most people never dream are possible. Let me introduce you to Marcus, a man whose discovery of this inner temple transformed not only his life, but challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of reality itself. Marcus was a struggling artist living in a cramped studio apartment, barely making ends meet by teaching art classes to children. He had talent, passion, and dreams, but somehow his outer world never seemed to reflect the magnificent visions he carried in his heart. For years, Marcus had tried every manifestation technique he could find. Vision boards, affirmations, goal setting, positive thinking. Nothing seemed to bridge the gap between his inner dreams and his outer circumstances. He was beginning to believe that some people were just meant to struggle, that perhaps he wasn't worthy of the success he craved. One night, after another rejection letter from a gallery, Marcus sat in his small apartment feeling completely defeated. In his desperation, he closed his eyes and instead of trying to visualize what he wanted, he simply asked the universe to show him what he was missing. What happened next changed everything. In his mind's eye, Marcus found himself standing in what could only be described as a magnificent temple. The walls weren't made of stone or wood, but of pure light that seemed to pulse with creative energy. The floors were crystalline, reflecting infinite possibilities like a cosmic kaleidoscope. And at the center of this temple sat a throne, not ornate or golden but simple and radiant, clearly meant for him. As Marcus approached the throne in this inner vision, he heard a voice, not external, but arising from the deepest wisdom within him. This is your true creative space. This is where all your art must first be born before it can exist in the world. You have been trying to create from the limitations of your external circumstances. True creation happens here first, in the sacred temple of consciousness. Marcus understood in that moment what the Alexandrian masters had known. Manifestation isn't about forcing the outer world to change. It's about first building the inner reality so completely, so vividly, that the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. This is the third sacred key that was encoded in the deepest chambers of the lost library. Building the sacred space of creation. The ancients knew that before anything could manifest in the physical world, it had to first be constructed with absolute clarity and emotional intensity in the inner temple of consciousness. But here's what makes this understanding revolutionary. This inner temple isn't just a visualization or meditation technique. It's an actual energetic structure that you build in the quantum field through focused consciousness. Modern quantum physics is discovering what the masters always knew. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it literally creates it. When you construct a reality in your inner temple with sufficient detail, emotion, and conviction, you're actually programming the quantum field to collapse possibilities into physical experience. Think about this scientifically for a moment. Every physical manifestation in your life began as a pattern in consciousness. Your house existed as blueprints before it became wood and stone. Your relationships existed as desires and intentions before they became physical interactions. Your career existed as dreams and plans before it became daily actions and results. The masters of Alexandria took this understanding to its logical conclusion. If everything physical begins in consciousness, then the more masterfully you can construct realities in consciousness, the more powerfully and quickly they will manifest physically. They developed specific practices for building what they called the inner temple, a sacred space in consciousness where creation occurs with divine authority. Let me explain how this works from both a spiritual and scientific perspective. When you create detailed, emotionally charged mental experiences in your inner temple, several powerful processes occur simultaneously. First, you activate mirror neurons in your brain that fire as if the experience were actually happening. Your nervous system can't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one, so it begins preparing your body and behavior to match the reality you're creating in consciousness. Second, you generate specific brainwave patterns, particularly theta and gamma waves, that research shows are associated with profound states of creativity, learning, and what scientists call non-local consciousness. In these states, your awareness expands beyond the boundaries of your physical brain and begins to interface directly with the quantum field. Third, you create what quantum physicists call observer effect. Your focused consciousness actually influences the probability patterns in the quantum field, making certain outcomes more likely to manifest than others. You're literally tilting the scales of reality in favor of your inner vision. But perhaps most importantly, you begin to embody the emotional and energetic signature of your desired reality. This is crucial, because the quantum field doesn't respond to what you think. It responds to what you feel and who you're being. When you spend time in your inner temple feeling the emotions of your fulfilled desires, you start broadcasting that energetic signature into the field, which then attracts matching experiences back to you. Now, let me tell you what happened to Marcus once he discovered and began working with his inner temple. Every morning, Before he picked up a paintbrush, Marcus would close his eyes and enter his inner temple. He would sit on that crystalline throne and create detailed visions of his artistic success, not just imagining it, but feeling it with every fiber of his being. He would see himself walking through galleries filled with his paintings, feeling the satisfaction of knowing his art touched people's hearts. He would imagine conversations with collectors who were moved to tears by his work. He would feel the weight of checks in his hands, the security of knowing his creativity was valued and financially rewarded. Most importantly, he would feel the deep joy and fulfillment of being an artist whose work made a meaningful difference in the world. But Marcus didn't just visualize these scenes. He built them in his inner temple with architectural precision. He would spend time perfecting every detail: the lighting in the galleries, the expressions on viewers' faces, the texture of the canvas, even the smell of the paint and the feeling of the brushes in his hands. He made these inner experiences so real, so detailed, so emotionally compelling that they felt more vivid than his physical circumstances. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Within 3 months, Marcus received an invitation to display his work in a small local gallery. Within 6 months, a collector purchased 3 of his pieces for more money than Marcus had made in the previous year. Within a year, he was represented by galleries in 3 major cities, and his art was supporting not just his basic needs, but a lifestyle of creative freedom he had never dared imagine possible. But here's the most important part. None of these outer changes required Marcus to become a better artist or learn new techniques. His artistic skill remained essentially the same. What changed was his inner reality, and as his inner reality shifted, the outer world reorganized itself to match. This is the power of the inner temple. It's not about improving your circumstances through effort and struggle. It's about so completely embodying your desired reality and consciousness that your physical experience has no choice but to align with it. The Alexandrian masters understood that most people approach manifestation backwards. They try to change their outer circumstances first, hoping that external success will make them feel successful inside. But the masters knew that creation works in the opposite direction. First, you must become successful in consciousness, feeling and being what you want to experience, and then the outer world reflects that inner state. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't work for most people. Thinking positively while continuing to feel unsuccessful, unloved, or unfulfilled creates what the ancients called inner contradiction. Your thoughts say one thing while your emotional reality says another. The quantum field receives mixed signals and produces mixed results. But when you work with your inner temple properly, you eliminate this contradiction. You don't just think about what you want. You live it fully in consciousness first. You don't just hope for a better future. You inhabit that future so completely in your inner temple that it becomes more real to you than your current circumstances. Let me share another example of how this works in practice. Sarah was a single mother working 2 jobs to support her children, feeling trapped by financial limitation and exhausted by the constant struggle. She had heard about visualization and manifestation, but felt guilty spending time on daydreaming when she had so many practical responsibilities. Everything changed when Sarah understood that working in her inner temple wasn't escapism. It was the most practical thing she could do. She realized that as long as she continued operating from the consciousness of struggle and limitation, she would continue creating experiences that matched that inner state. Sarah began spending 15 minutes each morning in her inner temple, not visualizing unrealistic fantasies, but creating detailed experiences of financial ease and professional fulfillment. She would sit in her sacred inner space and feel what it was like to wake up refreshed instead of anxious about money. She would imagine checking her bank account and feeling secure instead of scared. She would envision work that fulfilled her soul while providing abundantly for her family. Most importantly, Sarah would spend time in her inner temple feeling like the kind of person who naturally attracted opportunities and abundance. She would embody the confidence, gratitude, and inner peace of someone whose life was working beautifully. She wasn't pretending or trying to convince herself of something false. She was genuinely connecting with and developing the aspects of herself that already existed, but had been dormant. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, Sarah began noticing opportunities she had previously overlooked. A conversation with a neighbor led to a part-time consulting opportunity that paid more than one of her previous full-time jobs. A chance encounter at her children's school connected her with a mentor who helped her launch a small business based on skills she didn't even realize were valuable. Within 6 months, Sarah had not only replaced the income from both her previous jobs, but was earning significantly more while working fewer hours and feeling more fulfilled. Her children noticed the change immediately. Their mother was happier, more present, and more peaceful than they had ever seen her. But Sarah's external success was really just a reflection of her inner transformation. By spending time in her inner temple connecting with her innate abundance and capability, she had become a different person, someone who naturally attracted different experiences. This is the profound truth that the masters of Alexandria encoded in the third sacred key. Your outer world is always a perfect reflection of your inner world. Change the inner, and the outer must follow. Build a reality in consciousness with sufficient clarity and emotional intensity, and the physical world will reorganize itself to match that inner blueprint. Now you might be wondering how to build and access your own inner temple. The beautiful truth is that this sacred space already exists within you. You simply need to discover it and learn to consciously inhabit it. Every human being has this inner temple because every human being is a creator by nature. The only question is whether you're using this creative space consciously and intentionally, or unconsciously and randomly. Most people are unconsciously creating in their inner temple all the time, but they're creating through worry, fear, and repetitive thoughts about what they don't want. They're using their sacred creative space to repeatedly rehearse problems, limitations, and worst-case scenarios. Then they wonder why their outer life seems to manifest exactly what they've been creating in consciousness. The third sacred key teaches you to reclaim conscious authority over your inner temple and use it for its intended purpose. As the sacred space where you architect your most beautiful reality before bringing it into physical form, here's a fundamental principle that will transform your understanding. Your inner temple isn't bound by the limitations of your current circumstances. In this sacred space, you have unlimited resources, infinite time, perfect health, ideal relationships, complete creative freedom, and direct access to divine wisdom. The only limitations in your inner temple are those you choose to accept. This means you can build and experience realities in consciousness that seem impossible from your current external perspective. You can feel wealthy while your bank account is modest, feel loved while you're single, feel successful while you're still building your career. This isn't self-deception, it's conscious creation. You're not lying to yourself about your current circumstances. You're developing the inner reality that will become your outer circumstances. The Alexandrian masters had a practice they called divine architecture, the conscious construction of perfect realities in the inner temple. They would spend hours in deep meditation, building detailed experiences of their highest possible lives with the precision of master architects and the artistry of divine creators. They understood that every detail mattered. The more specific, sensory, and emotionally engaging they made their inner experiences, the more powerfully those experiences would magnetize matching physical manifestations. They would see colors, hear sounds, feel textures, smell fragrances, and taste flavors in their inner temple experiences, engaging all their senses to make the inner reality as vivid as possible. But beyond sensory detail, they would focus intensely on embodying the emotional states of their desired realities. They knew that emotions are the language the quantum field understands most clearly, so they would spend time in their inner temple feeling profound gratitude for experiences that hadn't yet manifested physically, deep joy for successes that existed only in consciousness, and complete love for relationships that were still in the process of forming. This emotional embodiment is perhaps the most crucial aspect of working with your inner temple. You're not trying to manufacture false feelings or convince yourself that your current circumstances are different than they are. Instead, you're connecting with and cultivating the emotional states that naturally correspond to your desired reality, knowing that these states will magnetize experiences that match them. As you begin to work more consciously with your inner temple, you'll discover something remarkable. The more time you spend creating beautiful realities in consciousness, the more beautiful your outer reality becomes. Not through struggle or effort, but through natural alignment. Your inner state begins to inform your outer actions. Your energy shifts in ways that affect how others respond to you, and opportunities appear that perfectly match the person you're becoming in your inner temple. Remember, The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this third sacred key is just one part of a complete transformation system. As you master the art of building and inhabiting your inner temple, you're preparing for even deeper keys that will teach you to sustain these elevated states, transmute old patterns, and become a master of your personal energy. Your inner temple is waiting for you. It has always been there, perfect and ready, containing all the resources you need to create any reality you can envision and feel. The question isn't whether you have access to this sacred space. The question is whether you're ready to claim conscious authority over it and use it to manifest the extraordinary life that has always been your birthright. Enter your temple, build your reality, feel your success, and watch as heaven descends to earth through the power of your conscious creation. Chapter 4: The Secret Language of Elevated Emotions. The fourth sacred key: encoding the future through the heart. What if I told you that your emotions are not just reactions to what happens to you, but rather quantum languages that communicate directly with the fabric of reality itself? What if every feeling you experience is actually a precise instruction to the universe about what kind of experiences to create in your life? What if the ancient masters of Alexandria discovered that certain elevated emotional states are literally the keys that unlock doors to dimensions of possibility that most people never access? This isn't metaphorical language. This is the most cutting-edge understanding of how consciousness interfaces with the quantum field to create physical experience. The fourth sacred key reveals something that will revolutionize how you understand the relationship between your inner emotional world and your outer circumstances. Emotions are not effects of your reality. They are the primary cause of your reality. Let me tell you about Diana, a woman whose discovery of this secret language transformed her from a victim of circumstances into a conscious architect of her own extraordinary life. Diana was a talented marketing professional who, despite her skills and dedication, seemed to attract one difficult situation after another. Toxic work environments, failed relationships, financial setbacks, health challenges. It was as if she had an invisible magnet that drew struggle and disappointment into her experience. For years, Diana tried to change her circumstances through action alone. She switched jobs, ended relationships, moved cities, changed her diet, even attempted various healing modalities. While some of these external changes provided temporary relief, the same patterns would inevitably return in new forms. Diana began to believe she was cursed, that some people were simply meant to struggle while others lived charmed lives. One day, during a particularly dark period when Diana felt completely overwhelmed by a perfect storm of professional and personal crises, she had an experience that changed everything. She was sitting in her car, crying from frustration and exhaustion, when suddenly she became aware of something she had never noticed before: the emotional state she was broadcasting into the world. In that moment of raw honesty, Diana realized that she spent most of her time feeling stressed, worried, resentful, or fearful. Even when things were going well, she was emotionally preparing for the next disaster. She was unconsciously radiating the energy of struggle, lack, and victimhood. And the universe was responding by delivering experiences that matched exactly what she was feeling and expecting. This was Diana's first glimpse of what the Alexandrian masters knew. Emotions are not random psychological phenomena. They are quantum broadcasting systems that transmit specific instructions to the field of infinite possibilities about what kind of reality to create. But Diana's awakening didn't stop with this realization. As she sat in that car, something deeper began to emerge. Instead of continuing to feel sorry for herself, Diana made a radical decision. She closed her eyes and asked herself a profound question. What would I feel like if my life was working beautifully? What emotional state would I naturally experience if everything I truly desired was already here? As Diana explored this question, something remarkable happened. She began to feel genuine gratitude, not for anything specific in her current circumstances, but for possibilities she could sense but not yet see. She felt a deep appreciation for the intelligence and creativity that existed within her, waiting to be expressed. She experienced profound love for herself as a being capable of transformation and growth. Most remarkably, Diana felt excited about her future in a way she hadn't experienced since childhood. Not excited about specific outcomes, but excited about the pure potential for beauty, joy, and contribution that she could feel stirring in her heart. These weren't artificial or forced feelings. They arose naturally when Diana stopped focusing on what was wrong and started connecting with the deeper truth of who she was and what was possible for her life. This is the essence of the fourth sacred key: learning to generate elevated emotions independent of external circumstances, and using these emotions as creative tools to broadcast new realities into existence. The ancient keepers of Alexandria understood something that modern science is only beginning to validate. Elevated emotions like gratitude, joy, love, and excitement aren't just pleasant feelings. They are literally creative forces that reorganize the quantum field and attract experiences that match their frequency. When you feel profound gratitude, you're not just enjoying a positive emotion, you're actually transmitting a specific electromagnetic signature into the field that says, "I am someone who has much to be grateful for." The universe then goes to work creating experiences that justify this emotional broadcast. When you feel genuine excitement about your future, you're not just being optimistic. You're literally encoding possibility into the quantum field and activating timeline potentials that were previously dormant. When you embody deep love and appreciation for yourself and life, you're not just practicing self-care, you're broadcasting an energetic signal that magnetizes loving, appreciative experiences back to you. This is why positive thinking alone often fails to create lasting change. Thoughts without corresponding emotions are like seeds without water. They might contain potential, but they lack the energy necessary for manifestation. The masters of Alexandria knew that emotion is the creative force that gives life to thought and translates mental possibilities into physical experiences. Let me explain this from both a scientific and energetic perspective. Modern research has discovered that elevated emotions produce dramatically different effects in your physiology than stress emotions. When you experience states like gratitude, joy, or love, your heart rhythm becomes coherent, creating a powerful electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond your physical body. This coherent heart field literally entrains your brain waves, synchronizes your nervous system, and optimizes your biological systems for health, creativity, and manifestation. But the effects extend far beyond your physical body. This coherent electromagnetic signature you emit when feeling elevated emotions actually influences the quantum field around you. Quantum physicists have discovered that consciousness and emotion can affect the behavior of subatomic particles, influencing which possibilities collapse into actual experience. In simple terms, when you feel elevated emotions, you're not just changing your internal state. You're literally reorganizing the field of potential around you to favor outcomes that match your emotional broadcast. Now, let me tell you what happened as Diana began to consciously work with this understanding. She made a commitment to spend time each day generating elevated emotions, not because of her circumstances, but independent of them. She would sit quietly each morning and deliberately connect with feelings of gratitude, excitement, love, and joy, not for anything specific, but as a practice of emotional creation. At first, this felt artificial and challenging. Diana's habitual emotional patterns were so entrenched that accessing elevated states felt like swimming against a strong current. But she persisted, understanding intuitively that she was reprogramming the very foundation of her reality. Gradually, something extraordinary began to happen. As Diana spent more time in elevated emotional states, her outer circumstances started to shift in ways that seemed magical, but were actually the natural result of her new energetic signature. Within weeks, Diana began attracting different kinds of people into her life. People who were positive, supportive, and genuinely interested in her well-being. Opportunities appeared that were perfectly aligned with her skills and interests. Even small daily interactions became more pleasant and harmonious. But the most profound changes were internal. Diana discovered that when she operated from elevated emotions, she had access to insights, ideas, and creative solutions that simply weren't available when she was stressed or fearful. She began making better decisions because she was accessing a higher intelligence that transcended her limited personal knowledge. Within 6 months, Diana had attracted a new position that was not only more fulfilling and better compensated than anything she had previously experienced, but working with people who appreciated and supported her natural talents. Her personal relationships transformed as she began attracting and maintaining connections with people who operated at her new emotional frequency. Most remarkably, Diana's health improved dramatically. Chronic tension she had carried for years simply dissolved. Her energy levels increased. She looked younger and more vibrant. People began commenting on her glow and asking what had changed. But here's what Diana understood that made all the difference. These weren't external changes that then made her feel better. These were external changes that reflected the elevated emotional states she had been consciously cultivating. She wasn't feeling grateful because good things happened. Good things were happening because she was feeling grateful. This is the profound truth encoded in the fourth sacred key. Your emotional state is not a response to your circumstances. Your circumstances are a response to your emotional state. The Alexandrian masters developed sophisticated understandings of what they called the emotional spectrum of creation. They knew that different emotional states accessed different levels of creative power and attracted different qualities of experience. At the lowest levels of the spectrum were what they called survival emotions: fear, anger, shame, guilt, resentment. These emotions aren't inherently bad or wrong. They served important evolutionary purposes for our ancestors. But when these states become habitual, they broadcast signals of limitation, danger, and scarcity into the quantum field, which responds by creating more experiences that justify these feelings. In the middle range were what we might call neutral emotions: contentment, acceptance, mild satisfaction. These states are pleasant but don't carry enough creative charge to manifest significant change. People who habitually operate in this emotional range tend to experience stable but unremarkable lives. But at the highest levels of the spectrum were the elevated emotions of creation: profound gratitude, unconditional love, pure joy, excited anticipation, deep appreciation, and what the masters called divine excitement. These emotions carry tremendous creative power because they align you with the same energetic frequencies that govern the creative forces of the universe itself. When you learn to generate and sustain these elevated emotions independent of external circumstances, you gain access to manifestation abilities that seem miraculous, but are actually natural expressions of your divine creative nature. Let me share another example that illustrates the practical application of this principle. Robert was a small business owner who had been struggling for years to grow his company. He had tried every marketing strategy, business system, and growth technique he could find, but his revenue remained frustratingly stagnant. Robert's breakthrough came when he realized that he was approaching his business from a consistent emotional state of worry, stress, and fear about money. Even when he was taking positive actions, he was emotionally broadcasting scarcity and struggle. His customers could feel this energy, and it affected everything from his sales conversations to his pricing decisions to his ability to attract quality team members. Robert decided to experiment with the fourth sacred key. Instead of focusing on what wasn't working in his business, he began each day by connecting with the emotional state of someone whose business was thriving beyond their wildest dreams. He would spend 20 minutes each morning feeling deep gratitude for his customers, genuine excitement about the value he provided, and profound appreciation for his team and resources. Initially, this felt completely divorced from his actual business situation. His revenue was still low, his stress was still high, and his problems were still very real. But Robert understood that he was engaged in emotional alchemy, transmuting the base emotions of struggle into the golden emotions of success. The transformation was remarkable. As Robert sustained these elevated emotional states, his entire approach to business began to change. He started making decisions from confidence rather than fear. He communicated with customers from a place of genuine excitement about serving them, rather than desperate need for their money. He began attracting team members who were aligned with growth and success rather than just looking for a paycheck. Most importantly, Robert's elevated emotional state made him more creative, more intuitive, and more attuned to opportunities that his stressed mind had been unable to perceive. He began receiving insights about new products, marketing approaches, and strategic partnerships that felt like they were being downloaded from a higher intelligence. Within 1 year, Robert's business had tripled in revenue, but more importantly, he was running a company that felt aligned with his highest values and brought him genuine joy and fulfillment every day. This is the power of emotional alchemy. When you change your emotional broadcast, you literally change what's possible in your life. But the masters of Alexandria knew that working with elevated emotions required more than just temporary positive feelings. They developed practices for what they called emotional entrainment, the process of training your nervous system to default to elevated states rather than survival states. They understood that most people's emotional patterns were established in childhood and reinforced through years of unconscious repetition. Simply trying to feel good occasionally wouldn't override these deeply ingrained patterns. True transformation required a systematic approach to emotional reprogramming. The masters taught that there were 3 stages to mastering the language of elevated emotions. First, recognition and observation. Before you can transform your emotional patterns, you must become consciously aware of them. Most people live their entire lives unconscious of the emotional signals they're constantly broadcasting. They feel stressed, worried, or frustrated so habitually that these states feel normal and inevitable. The first stage involves developing what the masters called emotional awareness, the ability to observe your feeling states objectively without being consumed by them. You begin to notice, I'm feeling anxious right now, or I'm broadcasting frustration, with the same objectivity you might notice the weather. This awareness alone begins to create space between you and your emotions, allowing you to realize that you are not your emotions. You are the consciousness that experiences emotions. This recognition is crucial because it returns choice to you. You can't change emotional patterns you're unconscious of, but once you can observe them clearly, you can begin to consciously select different states. Second, conscious generation. The second stage involves learning to generate elevated emotions independent of external circumstances. This is where many people struggle because they've been conditioned to believe that emotions happen to them rather than through them. The masters knew that elevated emotions could be consciously created through focused attention, specific breathing patterns, memories of peak experiences, and what they called future remembering, the practice of feeling emotions as if desired experiences had already manifested. This stage requires practice and patience because you're literally rewiring neural pathways that may have been established for decades. But as you consistently generate elevated emotions through conscious choice rather than external stimulus, these states become more natural and accessible. Third, sustained embodiment. The third stage is where the real magic happens. This is when elevated emotions stop being something you do occasionally and become who you are consistently. Your nervous system becomes entrained to higher frequencies, and these elevated states become your new emotional baseline. When you reach this stage, you're no longer trying to feel grateful, joyful, or loving. You naturally embody these states because they've become integrated into your identity. From this place of sustained, elevated emotion, manifestation happens effortlessly because your consistent emotional broadcast is continuously creating experiences that match your elevated frequency. Diana and Robert both moved through these 3 stages, and their external transformations were the natural reflection of their internal emotional evolution. But perhaps the most profound aspect of the 4th sacred key is understanding that elevated emotions aren't just tools for personal manifestation, they're expressions of your divine nature. When you feel profound gratitude, you're experiencing the same emotion that the universe feels for its own creation. When you feel unconditional love, you're accessing the fundamental force that holds all existence together. When you feel excited anticipation, you're aligning with the creative joy that brings new possibilities into being. This is why elevated emotions feel so good and so natural when you access them. They're not artificial states you're trying to manufacture. They're your true nature expressing itself when fear, doubt, and limitation are temporarily set aside. The ancient masters taught that every human being is designed to operate primarily from elevated emotional states. Fear, stress, and struggle were meant to be temporary experiences that motivated necessary actions, not permanent residences for human consciousness. When you reclaim your natural emotional heritage and learn to live from elevated states, you're not just improving your life, you're fulfilling your divine design and contributing to the elevation of human consciousness itself. As you begin to work more consciously with the secret language of elevated emotions, you'll discover something remarkable. These states are contagious. When you consistently embody gratitude, joy, and love, everyone around you begins to feel more grateful, joyful, and loving. Your elevated emotional broadcast literally elevates the people and environments you encounter. This is why the masters considered emotional mastery not just a personal development practice, but a form of service to the world. Every moment you spend in elevated emotional states contributes to the collective consciousness of humanity and makes it easier for others to access these same frequencies. Remember, the ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this fourth sacred key is intimately connected with all the others. The recognition of your divine nature, first key, provides the foundation for emotional sovereignty. Sacred breathing, second key, gives you the physiological tools to shift states rapidly. Your inner temple, third key, provides the environment where elevated emotions can be cultivated and sustained. And there are 6 more keys yet to come, each building upon this emotional foundation to create a complete system of conscious creation and spiritual mastery. Your emotions are not random chemicals in your brain. They are quantum languages that speak directly to the creative intelligence of the universe. Master this language, and you master the ability to encode any reality you can envision into the field of infinite possibilities. Feel deeply, feel consciously, feel elevated, and watch as the universe responds to your emotional broadcast by creating experiences that match the beauty, joy, and love you're transmitting into the world. The secret language has been revealed. Now it's time to become fluent in the dialect of miracles. Chapter 5. The Hidden Power of Creator Words. The 5th Sacred Key. Invoking Realities Through Sacred Speech. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. These ancient verses point to a truth that the masters of Alexandria understood with scientific precision. Words are not merely sounds or symbols that communicate ideas. They are creative forces that literally shape reality at the quantum level. Every word you speak, every phrase you repeat, every declaration you make is an act of creation, programming your subconscious mind, influencing your cellular biology, and sending specific instructions to the infinite field of possibilities. But among all the words in human language, there are 2 that carry more creative power than any others. I am. These simple words are not just grammatical constructs. They are literally the most potent creative formula in existence. When you say I am, followed by anything, you are not merely describing yourself. You are defining yourself, declaring your identity to the universe, and invoking that reality into being. The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew something that would revolutionize your entire approach to language and self-expression. The words that follow I am become the creative instructions for your life experience. Whatever you consistently claim to be, you become. Whatever you repeatedly declare about yourself becomes your lived reality. This isn't positive thinking or wishful affirmation. This is the fundamental mechanism through which consciousness creates form. Let me tell you about Michael, a man whose discovery of this creative power transformed him from someone who felt powerless and victimized by circumstances into a conscious architect of his own extraordinary reality. Michael was a middle manager in a corporate environment where he felt invisible, undervalued, and trapped. For years, his internal dialogue was a constant stream of self-limiting declarations. I am not good with people. I am not leadership material. I am not creative. I am stuck. I am unlucky. Michael didn't realize it, but he was using the most powerful creative force in the universe, his I am statements, to continuously recreate the very limitations he desperately wanted to escape. Every time he said I am not confident or I am not successful, he was literally programming his subconscious mind to find evidence for these declarations and create experiences that proved them true. One day, during a particularly frustrating team meeting where Michael felt completely overlooked and dismissed, he had an experience that changed everything. Instead of his usual internal response of I am invisible or I am powerless, a different thought spontaneously arose. I am unlimited potential expressing through this temporary situation. The moment Michael made this declaration, even silently to himself, something shifted. He felt a subtle but unmistakable expansion in his chest, a sense of dignity and possibility that had been dormant for years. More importantly, the energy in the room seemed to respond to his internal shift. Within minutes, his supervisor asked for his input on a project, something that rarely happened. This was Michael's first glimpse of what the Alexandrian masters knew. When you consciously declare your true nature through I am statements aligned with your divine identity, reality immediately begins to reorganize itself to match your new self-declaration. The fifth sacred key that was encoded in the deepest chambers of the lost library reveals this profound truth. Words, especially I am declarations, are not descriptions of reality. They are creative commands that bring realities into existence. When you truly understand and apply this principle, you gain the ability to literally speak new versions of yourself into being. But before we explore how to use this power constructively, let me explain why I am statements are so potent from both a scientific and spiritual perspective. When you make an I am declaration, several powerful processes occur simultaneously. Neurologically, your brain immediately begins searching for evidence to support whatever follows I am. This happens because of a mechanism called the reticular activating system, RAS, which filters the overwhelming amount of sensory information you encounter every moment and highlights experiences that match your core beliefs about yourself. When you declare I am successful, your brain starts noticing opportunities, resources, and possibilities that support this identity. When you declare I am struggling, your brain filters your experience to emphasize challenges and limitations. Cellularly, your words create biochemical responses throughout your entire body. Research has shown that self-talk directly affects hormone production, immune function, and gene expression. Positive self-declarations trigger the release of neurotransmitters associated with confidence, creativity, and well-being, while negative self-statements flood your system with stress hormones that literally age your body and diminish your capabilities. Energetically, I am statements broadcast specific frequencies into the quantum field, attracting experiences that vibrate at the same level as your self-declarations. When you consistently declare elevated truths about yourself, you emit electromagnetic signatures that magnetize corresponding experiences back to you. Spiritually, I am statements are recognized by mystics and sages throughout history as sacred names of the divine. When you say I am, you're invoking the same creative power that spoke the universe into existence. You're literally using the fundamental creative force of consciousness to define and manifest your experience. This is why the masters of Alexandria treated I am declarations with such reverence and precision. They understood that these weren't casual statements, but sacred invocations that directly interfaced with the creative mechanisms of reality itself. Now let me tell you how Michael's life transformed once he began consciously working with this understanding. Instead of allowing his habitual negative self-talk to run unchecked, Michael made a commitment to become acutely aware of every I am statement he made, both aloud and in his internal dialogue. The first thing he discovered was shocking. He was making dozens of unconscious self-limiting declarations every day. I am so tired. I am not good at this. I am overwhelmed. I am behind. I am stressed. These statements had become so automatic that he didn't even notice he was continuously programming himself for limitation and struggle. Michael realized he had been using the most powerful creative tool in existence to unconsciously sabotage himself for years. But instead of feeling guilty or discouraged by this discovery, he felt empowered. If he had been unconsciously creating limitation through unconscious I am statements, he could consciously create expansion through intentional ones. Michael began what he called his I am revolution. He created a list of elevated I am declarations that reflected not his current circumstances but his highest potential. I am infinitely creative. I am naturally confident. I am a powerful leader. I am divinely guided. I am abundantly blessed. I am magnetically attractive to opportunities. Initially, these declarations felt artificial and untrue. Michael's logical mind protested. But you're not confident, look at how you behaved in that meeting. Or, you're not abundant, look at your bank account. But Michael understood something crucial. He wasn't describing his current circumstances. He was declaring his true nature and commanding his reality to align with these higher truths. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. As Michael consistently made these elevated I am declarations, his entire demeanor began to change. He walked differently, spoke with more authority, and approached challenges from a completely different energy. People started responding to him in ways they never had before. Within 3 months, Michael was promoted to a leadership position he had never even applied for. His supervisor said there was something different about his presence, that he had developed executive presence, seemingly overnight. Within 6 months, Michael was leading a team of people who respected and admired his leadership style. Within a year, he had been recruited by another company for a senior executive role with triple his previous salary. But the most profound changes weren't external, they were internal. Michael discovered that when he consistently declared elevated truths about himself, he began to naturally embody those qualities. His I am declarations weren't just changing how others perceived him. They were literally transforming who he was at the cellular level. This is the profound power encoded in the fifth sacred key. Your I am declarations don't just describe who you are, they determine who you become. The Alexandrian masters understood that there were specific principles for working with creator words that would maximize their transformative power. First, alignment with divine truth. The most powerful I am statements are those that align with your divine nature rather than your temporary circumstances. Instead of declaring I am wealthy when you're financially challenged, declare I am abundantly provided for, or I am magnetically attractive to prosperity. These statements acknowledge your divine inheritance without creating internal resistance about your current situation. Second, present tense authority. Creator words must be declared in the present tense as if the reality they describe already exists. Saying, I will be successful, keeps success perpetually in the future, but declaring, I am successful, claims that reality now, instructing the universe to provide evidence for your current elevated identity.
Third, emotional embodiment. Words without feeling are like seeds without water. They contain potential but lack the energy for manifestation. When you make I am declarations, you must feel them in your body, embody them in your posture, and radiate them through your energy field. The combination of word and feeling creates the most powerful creative force available to human consciousness. Fourth, consistent repetition. Transformation requires consistency.
One powerful I am declaration won't override years of limiting self-talk. But consistent daily practice of elevated declarations will progressively reprogram your subconscious mind, reshape your neural pathways, and literally rewire your brain for success and fulfillment. Let me share another example that illustrates these principles in action. Jennifer was a talented professional who had struggled with social anxiety her entire life. Despite her competence and intelligence, she consistently sabotaged herself in professional and personal situations through unconscious I am declarations. I am so awkward. I am not interesting. I am boring. I am invisible. Jennifer's breakthrough came when she realized that her social anxiety wasn't a fixed personality trait. It was the result of years of unconscious self-programming through negative I am statements. She decided to consciously reprogram herself through what she called identity reconstruction. Instead of trying to convince herself she wasn't anxious, Jennifer began declaring elevated truths about her social nature. I am naturally charismatic. I am genuinely interesting to others. I am magnetically confident. I am a joy to be around. I am socially gifted. At first, these declarations felt completely false. Jennifer's anxiety was real, and her social interactions were genuinely challenging. But she understood that she wasn't trying to deny her current experience. She was declaring her true nature and commanding her reality to align with it. Jennifer practiced these declarations every morning with full emotional embodiment. She would stand in front of a mirror, look herself in the eyes, and declare these truths with complete conviction, feeling them in every cell of her body. She would visualize herself moving through social situations with grace and confidence, feeling the emotions of someone who naturally attracted positive attention and enjoyable interactions. The transformation was remarkable. As Jennifer consistently declared her elevated social identity, her brain began searching for evidence to support these new beliefs. She started noticing positive responses from people that she had previously missed. She began receiving compliments and invitations that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Most importantly, she began feeling genuinely confident in social situations because her I am declarations had literally reprogrammed her nervous system. Within 6 months, Jennifer had been invited to join the board of a professional organization, had developed several meaningful friendships, and was regularly speaking at industry events. People described her as naturally charismatic and magnetically confident, exactly the qualities she had been declaring about herself. But Jennifer understood the deeper truth. She hadn't become charismatic and confident. She had always possessed these qualities. Her I am declarations had simply removed the false programming that had been covering up her true nature. This brings us to one of the most profound aspects of the fifth sacred key. You cannot declare anything about yourself that isn't already true at the highest level of your being. When you make elevated I am statements, you're not creating new qualities. You're uncovering and activating qualities that have always existed within your divine nature. Every human being contains infinite potential, unlimited creativity, boundless love, and divine wisdom. But most people live their entire lives declaring limitations instead of possibilities, problems instead of solutions, lack instead of abundance. They use the most powerful creative force in the universe to recreate the very experiences they most want to change. The masters of Alexandria developed sophisticated practices for what they called sacred speech, the conscious use of words, especially I am declarations, as tools of spiritual and practical transformation. They understood that every word carried creative power, but I am statements carried the most concentrated creative force because they directly interface with identity, and identity is destiny. They taught that there were different categories of I am declarations for different aspects of transformation. Identity. Declarations establish your fundamental sense of self. I am divine. I am unlimited. I am perfect as I am worthy of love and success. Quality declarations activate specific attributes within your nature. I am confident. I am creative. I am intuitive. I am magnetic. Relationship declarations program how you interact with others and the world. I am loving and lovable. I am a blessing to others. I am surrounded by support. Abundance declarations align you with prosperity and flow. I am abundantly provided for. I am a magnet for opportunities. I am richly blessed. Purpose declarations connect you with your highest calling. I am here to serve. I am fulfilling my divine mission. I am making a meaningful difference. But perhaps the most powerful category was what they called divine identity declarations, statements that align you directly with your source nature. I am one with infinite intelligence. I am an expression of divine love. I am co-creating with the universe. I am the presence of peace. These declarations don't just change your circumstances, they transform your entire relationship with existence itself. When you consistently declare your divine identity, you begin operating from a completely different level of power, wisdom, and creative capability. The masters also understood that I am declarations must be balanced with what they called conscious negation, the practice of consciously refusing to accept limiting identities that had been imposed from outside sources. This involves recognizing and rejecting false I am statements that came from family conditioning, societal programming, or past experiences. For example, if you grew up hearing, "You're not smart enough," or "You're not talented," part of your transformation involves consciously declaring, "I am not limited by past conditioning. I am not defined by others' opinions. I am not my past mistakes or failures." This conscious negation clears space for elevated declarations to take root and flourish in your consciousness. Let me share one more example that illustrates the profound practical applications of this sacred key. Maria was a single mother working 2 jobs to support her children, feeling completely overwhelmed and trapped by her circumstances. Her habitual self-talk was a constant stream of survival-based I am statements. I am so tired. I am barely keeping up. I am alone in this. I am struggling. Maria's transformation began when she realized she was using creator words to continuously recreate the very experiences that were exhausting her. She made a radical decision to begin each day with elevated I am declarations, even when, especially when, her circumstances seemed to contradict them. Every morning before her children woke up, Maria would spend 10 minutes declaring her true identity. I am divinely supported. I am abundantly provided for. I am a phenomenal mother. I am capable of creating miracles. I am attracting wonderful opportunities. Initially, these declarations felt like lies given her challenging circumstances. But Maria understood she wasn't describing her current situation. She was invoking her highest potential and commanding the universe to provide evidence for her elevated identity. The changes began subtly but accelerated rapidly. As Maria consistently declared her divine nature, her energy shifted in ways that affected everything around her. Her children began responding to her with more cooperation and less resistance. Her employers noticed her positive attitude and began offering additional responsibilities with increased compensation. Most remarkably, opportunities began appearing that seemed divinely orchestrated. A chance conversation led to a part-time consulting opportunity that eventually replaced both her previous jobs with better pay and flexible hours. A neighbor offered to help with childcare in exchange for services Maria could easily provide. Resources and support appeared from unexpected sources. Within 18 months, Maria had created a life that looked nothing like her previous struggle. She was earning more while working less, had developed a support network of wonderful friends, and was raising her children in an environment of joy and abundance rather than stress and scarcity. But Maria understood the deeper truth. Her external circumstances had shifted because her internal identity had been fundamentally transformed through the power of conscious I am declarations. This is the profound promise encoded in the fifth sacred key. When you change your self-declarations, you literally change your destiny. Your words are not describing your life, they are creating your life. Every I am statement is a creative command that instructs the universe about what kind of experiences to manifest in your reality. The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this key worked synergistically with all the others. Recognition of your divine nature, first key, provides the foundation for elevated self-declarations. Sacred breathing, second key, gives you the physiological state to embody your declarations powerfully. Your inner temple, third key, provides the environment where new identities can be visualized and felt. Elevated emotions, fourth key, supply the energetic charge that makes declarations manifest rapidly. And there are 5 more keys yet to come, each building upon this foundation of conscious self-creation through sacred speech. As you begin to work more consciously with the power of creator words, pay attention to every I am statement you make. Notice how many times you unconsciously limit yourself through casual self-declarations. Begin to interrupt these limiting patterns and consciously choose declarations that reflect your highest nature. Remember, you are not improving yourself through I am declarations. You are uncovering yourself. Every elevated statement about your identity removes another layer of false programming and reveals more of the magnificent being you have always been. Start today. Choose 3 elevated I am declarations that reflect qualities you know exist within your divine nature. Repeat them every morning with emotional conviction. Feel them in your body. Embody them in your posture. Radiate them through your presence. Watch how the universe responds to your new self-declarations by creating experiences that match the elevated identity you're claiming. This isn't positive thinking. This is conscious creation through the most powerful tool you possess, your sacred speech. I am. These are the 2 words that precede every reality you create. Use them wisely. Use them consciously. Use them as the divine creator you were born to be. The hidden power has been revealed. Now speak your highest reality into existence. Chapter 6. The Transmutation of Ancestral Memories. The 6th Sacred Key. Liberating yourself from inherited patterns. What if I told you that many of the limitations you struggle with aren't actually yours? What if the fears that hold you back, the patterns that repeat in your life, and the invisible barriers that seem to block your success are inherited programs running in your cellular memory from ancestors you've never met? What if the ancient masters of Alexandria discovered that true transformation requires not just changing your personal patterns, but transmuting the ancestral codes that have been influencing your family lineage for generations? This revelation challenges everything most people believe about personal responsibility and individual transformation. While you are absolutely responsible for your current choices and their consequences, the unconscious programming that influences those choices often originates from ancestral experiences encoded in your very DNA. The 6th Sacred Key reveals a profound truth that modern epigenetic science is only beginning to understand. You carry within your cellular memory not just your own experiences, but the unresolved patterns, traumas, and limitations of your entire ancestral line. But here's the empowering truth. Just as you can inherit these patterns, you also have the power to transmute them, not only freeing yourself, but healing your entire lineage both backward and forward in time. Let me tell you about Rebecca, whose discovery of this hidden inheritance transformed not only her life, but revealed patterns that had been unconsciously governing her family for over a century. Rebecca was a successful therapist who had done years of personal development work. Yet she found herself repeatedly struggling with the same core issues. A deep fear of financial insecurity that seemed irrational given her education and capabilities, and a persistent pattern of self-sabotage whenever she approached significant success. Despite her professional training and extensive inner work, these patterns felt almost autonomic, like they were operating from a level deeper than her personal psychology. Rebecca had healed her childhood wounds, worked through her limiting beliefs, and developed strong spiritual practices. Yet these particular patterns seemed to have a life of their own, resurging whenever she tried to expand beyond a certain level of success and security. The breakthrough came during a family gathering when Rebecca's elderly aunt began sharing stories about their great-grandmother, a woman who had lost everything during the Great Depression. As her aunt described how their great-grandmother had lived in constant fear of poverty for the rest of her life, passing down to her children a deep distrust of financial security and unconscious beliefs about the danger of getting too comfortable, Rebecca felt a shock of recognition. The fear patterns that had been plaguing her weren't just her own. They were ancestral memories encoded in her cellular inheritance, unconscious programming that had been passed down through generations like an invisible genetic blueprint for limitation and struggle. This was Rebecca's introduction to what the Alexandrian masters knew. Ancestral patterns are not just psychological inheritance, they are actual energetic and cellular programs that influence thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and even life circumstances until they are consciously identified and transmuted. The ancient keepers of Alexandria understood something that our individualistic culture has largely forgotten. Human beings don't exist in isolation. We are part of interconnected family systems, ancestral lineages, and collective consciousness patterns that stretch back through time. The unresolved experiences of our ancestors create what the masters called karmic patterns, energetic templates that continue to influence descendants until someone in the lineage develops enough consciousness to heal and transmute them. Modern science is validating this ancient wisdom through research in epigenetics, the study of how environmental factors and experiences can alter gene expression and be passed down to future generations. Scientists have discovered that trauma, stress, and even belief patterns can create chemical changes in DNA that are inherited by children and grandchildren, influencing their psychological tendencies, health predispositions, and behavioral patterns. But the Alexandrian masters went far beyond what current science understands. They knew that ancestral patterns operate not just biologically but energetically, creating what they called inherited limitations, unconscious programs that continue to influence family lineages until they are consciously transformed by someone with sufficient awareness and spiritual power. These inherited patterns might manifest as recurring family themes, the same types of struggles appearing generation after generation, patterns of financial difficulty, relationship challenges, health issues, addiction, or emotional patterns that seem to run in families beyond what genetics alone could explain. Unconscious fears and limitations, deep-seated fears or limitations that don't seem connected to personal experience, terror of success, fear of visibility, unconscious beliefs about unworthiness, or sabotage patterns that activate whenever life becomes too good. Energetic blocks, invisible barriers that prevent progress in specific areas of life despite conscious effort and capability, career ceilings that seem impossible to break through, relationship patterns that repeat regardless of partner choice, or creative blocks that persist despite talent and training. Unexplained emotional reactions, intense emotional responses to certain situations that feel disproportionate to current circumstances, overwhelming anxiety about financial security despite current stability, or panic responses to specific situations that trigger ancestral memories rather than personal experience. The masters taught that these patterns persist because they represent unfinished business in the family consciousness. Ancestors who experienced trauma, limitation, or unresolved challenges create energetic imprints that continue to influence the lineage until someone develops the consciousness and compassion to heal these patterns on behalf of the entire family system. This is both the challenge and the opportunity of ancestral healing. You have the power to become what the masters called an ancestral healer, someone who transmutes inherited patterns not just for yourself, but for your entire lineage, healing the past and blessing the future. Let me tell you how Rebecca applied this understanding to create profound transformation in her own life and family system. Once she recognized that her financial fears and success sabotage weren't just personal issues, but inherited patterns from her great-grandmother's Depression-era trauma, Rebecca approached healing from a completely different perspective. Instead of continuing to work on these patterns as personal limitations, Rebecca began what the masters called ancestral dialogue, a practice of connecting consciously with her ancestral line to understand, forgive, and transmute inherited patterns with love and compassion. Rebecca would enter a deep meditative state and envision herself surrounded by the spirits of her ancestors, particularly her great-grandmother. Instead of feeling resentful about inherited limitations, she approached these ancestors with profound gratitude and understanding. She recognized that their struggles and fears had been survival responses to real circumstances, and that they had done the best they could with their level of consciousness and resources. In these inner dialogues, Rebecca would speak directly to her great-grandmother's spirit. "I understand the fear and trauma you experienced. You were protecting yourself and our family the only way you knew how. I honor your struggle and your survival. Now I have the opportunity to transmute this fear pattern so that future generations can experience financial security and success without terror. I do this healing work not just for myself, but as a gift of love to you and to all who come after us." As Rebecca continued this ancestral healing work, she began to feel profound shifts not just in her own psychology, but in what felt like the energetic field of her entire family system. The fear patterns that had felt so autonomous and persistent began to soften and transform as she brought conscious love and understanding to their ancestral origins. But Rebecca didn't stop with emotional healing. The masters had taught specific techniques for what they called pattern transmutation, the conscious reprogramming of inherited limitations into ancestral gifts and strengths. Rebecca began to reframe her inherited sensitivity to financial security, not as a limitation but as a gift of awareness and responsibility. She transformed her great-grandmother's survival fears into conscious financial wisdom, developing investment skills and money management practices that created genuine security while honoring the ancestral concern for protection and stability. She transmuted the inherited pattern of success sabotage into what she called sustainable success, allowing herself to thrive and prosper while maintaining the ancestral values of humility, service, and connection to family. The results were remarkable. As Rebecca healed these ancestral patterns, her therapy practice began to flourish in ways that felt both successful and sustainable. She attracted clients who were dealing with similar ancestral healing work, allowing her to serve at a much deeper level while creating the financial abundance that had previously triggered fear responses. But perhaps most remarkably, Rebecca began receiving feedback from family members who reported their own spontaneous improvements in the exact areas she had been healing ancestrally. Her sister, who had struggled with similar financial fears, suddenly found herself making different choices about money and career. Her cousin, who had battled the same success sabotage patterns, began allowing herself to receive recognition and compensation for her considerable talents. This is one of the most profound aspects of ancestral healing work. When you transmute inherited patterns with genuine consciousness and love, the healing effect extends throughout the entire family system, influencing not just your own experience, but creating positive changes for relatives who may have no conscious awareness of the work you're doing. The masters of Alexandria taught that every person who undertakes conscious ancestral healing becomes what they called a lineage transformer, someone whose individual transformation creates healing waves that extend through time, blessing ancestors who have passed on and future generations who have yet to be born. But ancestral healing work requires specific understanding and approach to be truly effective. The masters developed sophisticated principles for this sacred work. First, recognition without blame. Ancestral healing begins with recognizing inherited patterns without blame or resentment toward ancestors who passed them on. These patterns were usually created as survival responses to real challenges and traumas. The ancestors who developed these patterns were doing their best to protect themselves and future generations with their level of consciousness and resources. Second, compassionate understanding. True healing happens when you can hold inherited patterns with compassion, understanding the circumstances that created them, and honoring the protective intention behind them, even when they no longer serve your current life circumstances. Third, conscious transmutation. Rather than simply trying to eliminate inherited patterns, the masters taught the practice of transmuting them, transforming limitations into gifts, fears into wisdom, wounds into sources of strength and service. This honoring approach creates healing rather than rejection. Fourth, lineage blessing. The highest form of ancestral work involves consciously sending blessings and healing energy not just to ancestors, but to future generations, becoming a bridge of consciousness that transforms the inherited programming for the entire lineage. Let me share another example that demonstrates these principles in action. David discovered that his family carried an inherited pattern of what he called creative suppression, a multi-generational tendency to minimize, hide, or sabotage artistic and creative expressions. Through genealogical research, David discovered that his great-great-grandfather had been an artist whose work was ridiculed and rejected, leading him to abandon his creative pursuits and develop deep shame about artistic expression. This ancestral wound had been passed down through the generations, creating a family pattern where creative talents were either completely suppressed or expressed only secretly and apologetically. David himself was a talented musician who had spent years hiding his abilities and feeling guilty whenever he experienced creative joy. Working with the sixth sacred key, David approached this ancestral pattern with the understanding that his great-great-grandfather's creative suppression had been a protective response to real rejection and ridicule. Instead of resenting this inherited limitation, David felt deep compassion for his ancestors' pain and disappointment. In his ancestral healing work, David would enter his inner temple and connect with his great-great-grandfather's spirit, offering understanding and healing. I honor your artistic gifts and the pain you experienced when they were rejected. Your talent was real and valuable, even though others couldn't see it. I understand why you chose to protect yourself and future generations by suppressing creative expression. Now I have the opportunity to heal this pattern by expressing the family's creative gifts with confidence and joy. David began consciously transmuting the inherited pattern of creative shame into what he called confident creative service, expressing his musical talents as gifts to be shared with the world rather than vulnerabilities to be hidden. He reframed the family's creative sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a profound ability to touch people's hearts through art. As David healed this ancestral pattern, not only did his own musical career flourish, but family members across multiple generations began experiencing spontaneous creative awakenings. His elderly uncle, who had suppressed a love of poetry for 60 years, began writing and sharing his work. His teenage niece, who had been hiding her painting abilities, began displaying her art with confidence and pride. This is the miraculous nature of ancestral healing. When done with genuine consciousness and love, the transformation extends throughout the entire family system, creating positive changes that seem to transcend normal causality. The masters taught that certain souls incarnate specifically to serve as ancestral healers for their lineages, individuals who develop sufficient consciousness to identify and transmute inherited patterns that have been limiting their family for generations. These souls often experience the most intense versions of ancestral patterns, because they have incarnated specifically to heal them. If you find yourself dealing with patterns that seem deeper than personal experience, if you struggle with limitations that don't seem to match your own history and efforts, if you feel called to healing work that extends beyond your individual transformation, you may be one of these ancestral healers, someone whose purpose includes serving as a transformer of inherited limitations. The work isn't always easy. Ancestral patterns often have tremendous momentum and can feel almost alive in their resistance to change. But the masters provided tools for this sacred work that make transformation not only possible, but inevitable when applied with consistency and love. The practice of ancestral recognition. Begin by examining the patterns in your life that feel most autonomous and persistent. Look for themes that also appear in your family history: fears, limitations, relationship patterns, health issues, or behavioral tendencies that seem to run in your lineage. The practice of compassionate connection. Instead of resenting inherited patterns, develop genuine compassion for the ancestors who created them. Understand the circumstances that made these patterns necessary for survival and honor the protective intention behind them. The practice of conscious transmutation. Rather than trying to eliminate ancestral patterns, work to transform them into gifts. Fear becomes wisdom, wounds become sources of strength, limitations become sources of service and empathy for others facing similar challenges. The practice of lineage blessing. Consciously send healing energy both backward to ancestors and forward to future generations, knowing that your healing work creates positive changes throughout the entire family system across time. As you begin working with the sixth sacred key, remember that ancestral healing is simultaneously the most personal and most transpersonal work you can do. You're healing not just for yourself, but for your entire lineage, honoring the struggles of those who came before, while creating possibilities for those who will come after. The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this key worked synergistically with all the others. Your recognition of divine nature, first key, provides the spiritual authority to heal across generations. Sacred breathing, second key, gives you access to the deep states necessary for ancestral connection. Your inner temple, third key, provides the sacred space where lineage healing occurs. Elevated emotions, fourth key, supply the love and compassion necessary for true transmutation. Sacred speech, fifth key, allows you to speak new possibilities into your family lineage. You are not just an individual seeking personal improvement. You are a soul who has incarnated with the power and purpose to heal your entire ancestral line. The patterns you struggle with aren't just personal challenges. They're invitations to become an agent of transformation for your entire family system. Embrace this sacred responsibility. Connect with your ancestors with love and understanding. Transmute inherited limitations into ancestral gifts. And watch as your individual healing creates waves of positive change that extend throughout your entire lineage, blessing the past and brightening the future. The lineage transformer has awakened. The ancestral healing begins now. Chapter 7. The Master of Personal Energy. The seventh sacred key, commanding your vibrational signature. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the energy shift? Have you encountered people who seem to radiate a presence so powerful that everyone around them becomes more positive, more creative, more alive? Have you experienced moments when your own energy was so elevated that everything seemed to flow effortlessly? Doors opened mysteriously, and the right people appeared at precisely the right time? These aren't coincidences or lucky breaks. They are glimpses of a fundamental truth that the ancient masters of Alexandria understood with scientific precision. You are not a solid, separate being moving through empty space. You are a dynamic energy field in constant interaction with the infinite field of consciousness that surrounds and permeates everything in existence. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every intention you hold, broadcasts a specific electromagnetic signature into the quantum field. This signature, your personal vibration, acts like a radio frequency, attracting experiences, people, and opportunities that resonate at the same energetic level, while repelling those that vibrate at incompatible frequencies. The seventh sacred key reveals the most practical truth you will ever encounter. When you learn to consciously command your personal energy, you gain the ability to literally tune into any reality you desire and make it your lived experience. Let me tell you about Amanda, a woman whose mastery of this principle transformed her from someone who felt like a victim of circumstances into a person who could seemingly bend reality to her will through the conscious management of her energetic frequency. Amanda was a real estate agent struggling in a highly competitive market. Despite her knowledge, hard work, and genuine care for her clients, she consistently found herself trailing behind other agents who seemed to effortlessly attract listings and close deals. Amanda watched in frustration as colleagues with less experience and expertise consistently outperformed her, leaving her wondering if she simply wasn't cut out for sales success. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging period when Amanda had gone 3 months without a significant sale. Feeling desperate and defeated, she noticed something that changed her entire understanding of success and failure. Her most successful colleague, Maria, didn't seem to work any harder than Amanda, but she radiated a completely different energy. When Maria walked into a room, people immediately felt drawn to her. She spoke with quiet confidence, moved with graceful authority, and seemed to naturally expect positive outcomes. Most remarkably, opportunities appeared to seek Maria out rather than the other way around. Potential clients would call her directly, other agents would refer business to her, and sellers would specifically request her services. Amanda realized that the difference between herself and Maria wasn't strategy, skill, or even effort. It was energetic. While Amanda unconsciously radiated anxiety, doubt, and desperation for sales, Maria consistently broadcast confidence, abundance, and magnetic attraction. Amanda was unknowingly repelling the very success she desperately wanted through her energetic frequency. This was Amanda's introduction to what the Alexandrian masters knew. Your external results are always a perfect reflection of your internal energetic state. Change your frequency, and you literally change what's possible in your life. But understanding this principle and applying it effectively are two different things. The masters of Alexandria developed sophisticated practices for what they called energetic sovereignty, the ability to consciously choose and maintain specific vibrational frequencies regardless of external circumstances. They understood that most people live their entire lives as energetic reactors, allowing their internal state to be determined by whatever is happening around them. When circumstances are positive, they feel good and radiate higher frequencies. When circumstances are challenging, they feel bad and broadcast lower frequencies. This reactive approach creates what the masters called vibrational chaos, constantly shifting energy that produces inconsistent and often disappointing results. But true energetic mastery involves becoming what they called a conscious transmitter, someone who chooses their frequency based on their desired reality rather than their current circumstances. These individuals learn to generate and maintain elevated energetic states even when external conditions would normally trigger lower frequencies. Let me explain this scientifically. Your body is essentially a sophisticated electromagnetic broadcasting system. Your heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field in your body, about 60 times greater than that produced by your brain. This heart field extends several feet beyond your physical body and carries information about your emotional and mental states. When you feel elevated emotions like gratitude, love, or excitement, your heart rhythm becomes coherent, creating a powerful, organized electromagnetic field that influences everything in your environment. People unconsciously attune to this coherent frequency, which is why those in elevated states naturally attract positive interactions and opportunities. Conversely, when you feel stress emotions like fear, anger, or frustration, your heart rhythm becomes incoherent, creating a chaotic electromagnetic field that actually repels positive experiences and attracts problems and conflicts. But here's the revolutionary part. You can learn to consciously generate coherent heart rhythms and elevated electromagnetic fields regardless of your circumstances. This isn't positive thinking or emotional suppression. This is scientific energy management that produces measurable results in your external reality. Now, let me tell you how Amanda applied this understanding to completely transform her career and life. Once she recognized that her struggles were the result of unconscious energetic broadcasting rather than external factors, Amanda began what she called her frequency transformation project. Every morning, before making any business calls or meeting with clients, Amanda would spend 20 minutes consciously generating what she called her success frequency. She would sit quietly, place her hand on her heart, and begin breathing in a rhythm that created heart coherence. Breathing in for 5 counts, holding for 5 counts, breathing out for 5 counts. While maintaining this coherent breathing pattern, Amanda would consciously generate feelings of gratitude for her existing clients, excitement about serving new ones, and deep appreciation for her skills and expertise. She would feel into the frequency of someone who was naturally successful, magnetically attractive to opportunities, and genuinely valuable to everyone she served. Most importantly, Amanda would spend time energetically embodying the version of herself who was already thriving in real estate, feeling the confidence, joy, and natural ease of someone whose services were in high demand. She wasn't pretending or trying to convince herself of something false. She was consciously tuning into and broadcasting the frequency of her successful self. The transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Within the first month of this practice, Amanda noticed that potential clients seemed more responsive to her calls and more trusting in their interactions. Within 3 months, she had closed more deals than in the previous year. Within 6 months, Amanda had become one of the top-performing agents in her market, with a waiting list of clients who specifically requested her services. But the changes extended far beyond her career. As Amanda learned to consciously manage her frequency, every area of her life began to improve. Her relationships became more harmonious, her health improved, and opportunities appeared in areas completely unrelated to real estate. She had discovered that energetic mastery is a universal principle that affects all aspects of life experience. The most profound realization for Amanda was that she hadn't become a different person. She had simply learned to consistently broadcast the frequency of who she already was at her highest potential. The successful real estate agent had always existed within her. She had just been unconsciously transmitting frequencies that prevented this aspect of herself from being expressed and recognized. This is a crucial understanding embedded in the 7th sacred key. You don't need to become someone else to achieve success and fulfillment. You need to learn to energetically embody and broadcast the frequency of who you already are at your highest expression. The masters of Alexandria taught that every human being exists simultaneously at multiple vibrational levels. At the lowest levels are frequencies of survival, fear, and limitation. In the middle ranges are frequencies of comfort, routine, and modest satisfaction. At the highest levels are frequencies of creation, love, and unlimited possibility. Most people unconsciously operate from whatever frequency matches their current circumstances, which keeps them locked in repeating patterns. But energetic masters learn to consciously tune into and broadcast higher frequencies, which literally attracts experiences that match their elevated energetic state. The masters identified several key elements necessary for energetic mastery. Awareness of current frequency. Before you can change your energetic state, you must become conscious of what frequency you're currently broadcasting. Most people are completely unconscious of their energy field, operating on autopilot without realizing the signals they're constantly transmitting. Conscious frequency. Selection. True mastery involves learning to choose your energetic state based on your desired reality rather than your current circumstances. This means being able to broadcast confidence when you feel uncertain, abundance when you experience scarcity, and love when you encounter conflict. Emotional coherence. The most powerful energetic states occur when your thoughts, emotions, and intentions are aligned in coherent harmony. When all aspects of your being are broadcasting the same frequency, your electromagnetic field becomes incredibly powerful and influential. Sustained broadcasting. Momentary elevated states create momentary improvements, but sustained energetic mastery requires the ability to maintain higher frequencies consistently, even when external circumstances would normally trigger lower frequencies. Let me share another example that illustrates these principles in action. Michael was a small business owner whose company had been struggling for years. Despite implementing every business strategy he could find, his company remained trapped in cycles of financial stress and operational challenges that seemed to appear faster than he could solve them. Michael's transformation began when he realized that he was unconsciously broadcasting the frequency of struggle and scarcity throughout his business. When he walked into his office, spoke with employees, or met with potential clients, he was energetically transmitting anxiety, desperation, and fear about money. This frequency was repelling the very success he desperately wanted to create. Michael began applying the 7th sacred key by first developing awareness of his energetic state throughout the day. He noticed that he typically arrived at work already broadcasting stress frequency, which immediately affected his employees' energy and productivity. He observed that his anxiety about finances was actually creating the very financial problems he feared. Michael then began consciously choosing his frequency before entering any business situation. He would spend a few minutes in his car before meetings, consciously generating feelings of confidence, abundance, and excitement about serving his clients. He would energetically embody the version of himself who ran a thriving, successful company that was valued and appreciated by everyone it served. But Michael's most important practice was learning to maintain elevated frequencies even when challenging situations arose. When cash flow problems appeared, instead of immediately dropping into stress frequency, he would breathe coherently and consciously, broadcast the energy of someone who always found creative solutions to challenges. When employees brought problems to him, instead of absorbing their anxiety, he would maintain the frequency of calm confidence and optimistic problem-solving. The results were extraordinary. As Michael learned to consistently broadcast success frequency, his business began attracting different types of opportunities and clients. Problems that had seemed intractable began resolving themselves in unexpected ways. His employees became more creative, productive, and positive because they were now working in an elevated, energetic environment. Within 18 months, Michael's company had not only solved its financial challenges, but had grown into one of the most successful businesses in its industry. But Michael understood that the external success was simply a reflection of his internal energetic transformation. The masters taught that energetic mastery involves understanding and working with what they called the vibrational hierarchy. Lower frequencies like fear, anger, and shame create experiences of limitation, conflict, and scarcity. Higher frequencies like love, gratitude, and joy create experiences of expansion, harmony, and abundance. But the highest frequencies are what the masters called creation frequencies, states of consciousness that directly interface with the quantum field to manifest new realities. These include pure gratitude, not gratitude for specific things, but gratitude as a fundamental orientation to existence that attracts more experiences worthy of appreciation. Unconditional love, not love dependent on external conditions, but love as a natural expression of your divine nature that transforms everything it touches. Excited anticipation, not excitement about specific outcomes, but excitement about the infinite possibilities available in each moment that magnetizes opportunity and synchronicity. Creative joy, not happiness dependent on circumstances, but joy as a natural state of being that transforms work into play and effort into effortless flow. Divine confidence, not confidence based on past success, but confidence rooted in knowing your connection to infinite intelligence and unlimited creative power. When you learn to generate and sustain these creation frequencies, you literally become a magnet for miraculous experiences. People want to be around you, opportunities seek you out, problems resolve themselves, and life becomes a continuous flow of positive synchronicities. But perhaps the most important aspect of energetic mastery is understanding that your frequency affects not just your own experience, but the experience of everyone around you. When you consistently broadcast elevated frequencies, you literally uplift the energy of every environment you enter and every person you encounter. This is why the masters considered energetic mastery not just a personal development practice, but a form of service to the world. Every moment you spend in elevated frequency contributes to the collective consciousness of humanity and makes it easier for others to access these same states. The seventh sacred key also reveals that energetic mastery is closely connected to all the previous keys. Your recognition of divine nature, first key, provides the foundation for accessing higher frequencies. Sacred breathing, second key, gives you the physiological tools to shift energy rapidly. Your inner temple, third key, provides the environment where elevated frequencies can be cultivated. Elevated emotions, fourth key, are actually expressions of high-frequency states. Sacred speech, fifth key, allows you to declare and anchor new frequencies. Ancestral healing, sixth key, clears inherited patterns that block access to higher frequencies. As you begin to work more consciously with the seventh sacred key, start by developing awareness of your current energetic state throughout the day. Notice how your frequency affects your interactions, decisions, and the opportunities that appear or disappear in your life. Begin practicing conscious frequency selection by choosing elevated states before important interactions or challenging situations. Learn to generate coherent heart rhythms through conscious breathing and elevated emotions. Most importantly, commit to maintaining higher frequencies even when circumstances would normally trigger lower ones. Remember, you are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a conscious broadcaster whose frequency literally creates your circumstances. Master your energy, and you master your reality. The ancient masters knew that those who achieved true energetic sovereignty became what they called frequency generators, individuals whose very presence elevated everyone and everything around them. These masters understood that controlling your energy field is the ultimate spiritual practice because it directly serves both your highest good and the highest good of all. Your energy is your gift to the world. Make it beautiful, make it elevated, make it a blessing to everyone you encounter. The master of personal energy has awakened. Your frequency is your destiny. Choose it consciously. Chapter 8. The Art of Dying to be Reborn. The eighth sacred key. Releasing the past to embrace the infinite. What if I told you that the greatest obstacle to your transformation isn't external circumstances, limiting beliefs, or even past trauma, but rather your attachment to the familiar version of yourself that you've outgrown? What if the very identity you've spent years building and defending is actually the prison keeping you from experiencing the magnificent life that's waiting for you? The eighth sacred key reveals one of the most profound and challenging truths encoded in the ancient wisdom of Alexandria. True transformation requires a conscious death, not physical death, but the deliberate release of the limited self that has served its purpose, creating space for a more expanded version of yourself to emerge. This isn't metaphorical language. The masters of Alexandria understood that every quantum leap in consciousness, every significant life transformation, every movement into greater love, creativity, or power requires what they called conscious dying, the willingness to let go of who you have been in order to become who you are meant to be. Let me tell you about Jonathan, a man whose willingness to embrace this sacred death transformed him from a person trapped by his own success into someone living a life beyond what he had ever imagined possible. Jonathan was a successful corporate attorney who had achieved everything society told him would make him happy. Six-figure salary, prestigious position, beautiful home, respected reputation. By all external measures, Jonathan had made it. Yet every morning he woke up feeling like he was slowly suffocating in a life that belonged to someone else. For years, Jonathan tried to solve this problem by changing external circumstances. He switched law firms, bought a bigger house, took expensive vacations, even had an affair. Anything to escape the growing sense that his life was a beautiful prison. But nothing worked, because Jonathan was trying to transform his experience while clinging to the identity that was creating it. The breakthrough came during what Jonathan later called his dark night of the soul, a period of deep depression and anxiety that lasted several months. During this time, Jonathan felt like everything he had worked to build was falling apart. His marriage was struggling, his work felt meaningless, and he couldn't find joy or purpose in anything that had previously given his life meaning. One evening, sitting alone in his office after another meaningless day, Jonathan experienced something that changed everything. Instead of fighting against the feelings of emptiness and disconnection, he suddenly felt curious about them. For the first time, instead of trying to escape or fix his dissatisfaction, he asked himself a radical question. What if this feeling isn't a problem to be solved, but a message to be received? What if this death of meaning is actually preparing space for something completely new to be born? In that moment of surrender, Jonathan felt something shift. The Jonathan who had been desperately trying to find fulfillment within his current identity seemed to dissolve, and in that space of dissolution, he glimpsed a completely different possibility for his life, one that involved using his legal skills to serve environmental causes he deeply cared about, even though it would mean significant financial sacrifice and career upheaval. This was Jonathan's first taste of what the Alexandrian masters knew. The willingness to die to who you have been opens the doorway to who you are becoming. But conscious dying isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing practice of releasing attachments to outdated versions of yourself as you continue to evolve and expand. The masters understood that human beings are designed for continuous transformation, but most people resist this natural process because they become attached to identities that once served them, but have now become limitations. Every level of growth requires leaving behind aspects of yourself that were appropriate for your previous level of development. The identity that got you where you are is rarely the identity that will take you where you want to go. But most people try to transform their lives while clinging to familiar patterns of thinking, feeling, and being that are incompatible with their desired transformation. This creates what the masters called transformation resistance, an internal conflict between the part of you that wants to grow and the part of you that wants to remain safe and familiar. This resistance can manifest as self-sabotage, procrastination, fear of success, or a pattern of getting close to breakthroughs only to unconsciously sabotage them at the last moment. The eighth sacred key teaches that this resistance isn't a character flaw or personal weakness. It's a natural protective mechanism of the ego that can be worked with consciously and lovingly. Your current identity, no matter how limited, has been your survival strategy. It has protected you, helped you navigate challenges, and given you a sense of stability and continuity. Learning to consciously release aspects of identity requires honoring what they've provided, while recognizing when they've outlived their usefulness. Let me explain this process from both psychological and spiritual perspectives. From a psychological standpoint, your identity is composed of patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that have become so automatic you experience them as who you are. These patterns are encoded in neural pathways that have been strengthened through years of repetition, creating what neuroscientists call default mode networks, automatic ways of processing information and responding to experience. When you attempt to transform, you're essentially asking your brain to abandon well-established neural pathways in favor of new ones that don't yet exist. This creates neurological stress because your brain is designed to seek efficiency and predictability. The old patterns feel safe and familiar, while new patterns feel uncertain and potentially dangerous. From a spiritual perspective, your current identity is like clothing you've been wearing for so long you've forgotten you can take it off. Your soul, your essential divine nature, is infinitely creative and expansive, but it can only express through the identity structure you've built. When that structure becomes too small or rigid, your soul begins to feel constrained, leading to the restlessness, dissatisfaction, and crisis that often precede major transformation. The masters taught that this spiritual pressure for growth is actually grace, the universe's way of inviting you to expand into greater expressions of your divine nature. But this invitation requires what they called sacred surrender, the willingness to release your grip on who you think you are in order to discover who you really are. Now let me tell you how Jonathan applied this understanding to completely recreate his life. Once he recognized that his dissatisfaction wasn't a problem but an invitation to transformation, Jonathan began consciously practicing what he called identity archaeology, examining the beliefs, patterns, and attachments that comprised his current sense of self. Jonathan discovered that his identity as a successful attorney was built on several core beliefs: that his worth was determined by his income, that security came from prestigious positions, that happiness required external validation, and that significant change was too risky to attempt. These beliefs had served him in building his career, but they were now preventing him from creating a life that felt authentic and meaningful. Instead of trying to change his life while maintaining these beliefs, Jonathan made a radical decision. He would consciously die to the identity that was based on them. This didn't mean destroying everything he had built, but rather releasing his attachment to defining himself through external accomplishments and opening himself to discovering who he was beneath those achievements. Jonathan began what he called his conscious dying practice. Each morning, he would spend time in meditation consciously releasing his attachment to being the successful attorney. He would breathe into the fear and uncertainty that arose when he imagined letting go of this identity, allowing himself to feel the grief of losing a version of himself that had been so central to his sense of security and worth. But Jonathan also practiced what the masters called resurrection visioning, opening himself to feel into the person he was becoming without trying to control or define it. He would sit in the emptiness left by releasing his old identity and ask, "Who am I when I'm not trying to be anyone in particular? What wants to emerge through me when I stop forcing myself into outdated patterns?" The transformation was gradual but profound. As Jonathan practiced dying to his attachment to external validation, he began making decisions based on internal alignment rather than others' expectations. As he released his need for financial security above all else, he began considering career options that had previously seemed impossible. Within a year, Jonathan had transitioned from corporate law to environmental advocacy, taking a significant pay cut, but experiencing levels of fulfillment and purpose he had never known existed. He discovered that the skills he had developed as an attorney were perfectly suited to fighting for environmental protection, but it was only by dying to his identity as someone who practiced law for money that he could be reborn as someone who used law as a tool for service. But perhaps most remarkably, Jonathan's relationship with his wife was completely revitalized. As he stopped trying to be the person he thought she wanted him to be and started expressing his authentic self, their connection deepened in ways that surprised both of them. She told him that she felt like she was falling in love with him all over again, not because he had become someone different, but because he had finally become himself. This is the paradox of conscious dying. You don't actually lose anything real. You only lose the illusions and limitations that were preventing you from expressing your true nature. The masters of Alexandria identified several stages in the process of conscious dying and rebirth. Stage 1. The call to transformation. This usually manifests as dissatisfaction, restlessness, or crisis that signals your soul's readiness to expand beyond your current identity. Instead of trying to fix or escape these feelings, the masters taught to recognize them as sacred invitations to growth. Stage 2. Resistance and fear. When you begin to consider releasing familiar aspects of identity, your ego naturally resists. This isn't wrong or something to overcome. It's a natural protective response that can be worked with lovingly. The key is to acknowledge the fear while not allowing it to prevent necessary growth. Stage 3. Conscious release. This involves deliberately letting go of thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, and attachments that no longer serve your highest development. This isn't about forcing yourself to change, but about creating space for natural transformation to occur. Stage 4. The void. After releasing old patterns but before new ones have fully formed, you often experience what the masters called the fertile void, a space of uncertainty and potential that can feel uncomfortable but is actually the womb of transformation. Stage 5. Emergence. New aspects of yourself begin to emerge naturally when space has been created through conscious release. These aren't manufactured or forced. They arise organically from your essential nature when limitations are removed. Stage 6. Integration. The new aspects of identity gradually stabilize and become your new normal, creating a foundation for the next cycle of growth and transformation. Let me share another example that illustrates this process. Maria was a mother of 3 who had devoted 20 years to raising her children. Her entire identity was built around being mom. Every decision, every priority, every aspect of her daily life revolved around her children's needs. As her youngest child prepared to leave for college, Maria began experiencing what she initially thought was depression, but later recognized as an identity crisis. For 2 decades, Maria had found meaning, purpose, and self-worth through caring for her children. Now that they were becoming independent, she felt lost and purposeless. Her friends suggested she get a job or find a hobby, but Maria realized something deeper was happening. The identity that had sustained her through her children's growing years was dissolving, and she had no idea who she was beneath the role of mother. Working with the 8th sacred key, Maria began to see this transition not as a loss, but as an opportunity for conscious rebirth. Instead of frantically trying to fill the empty spaces left by her children's increasing independence, Maria embraced what she called the sacred emptiness. Maria spent time in meditation each day, consciously releasing her attachment to being needed as a mother in the ways she had been for 20 years. She allowed herself to grieve the ending of that beautiful chapter of her life, while opening herself to discover what wanted to emerge in the next phase. This process wasn't easy. Maria had to face fears about her worth and purpose outside of her maternal role. She had to confront questions about her interests, talents, and desires that had been dormant for decades. But as she practiced conscious dying to her exclusive identity as mom, space opened for other aspects of herself to emerge. Maria discovered a passion for environmental conservation that had been buried under years of child-rearing responsibilities. She found that her skills in organization, communication, and nurturing were perfectly suited to community activism. Within 2 years, Maria had become a respected leader in local environmental efforts, finding a sense of purpose and fulfillment that was different from but equally meaningful as her role as a mother. But the most beautiful part of Maria's transformation was that by releasing her attachment to being needed as a mother, she actually improved her relationships with her adult children. They began to see her as a complete person rather than just mom, and their connections deepened as they related to each other as whole human beings rather than just through family roles. The masters taught that conscious dying is not about destroying your past or pretending previous versions of yourself never existed. It's about recognizing that you are not any single identity or role. You are consciousness itself, capable of infinite expressions and transformations. They understood that most people's suffering comes from identifying too strongly with temporary aspects of themselves, roles, achievements, relationships, circumstances that are constantly changing. When you learn to hold your identities lightly, as temporary expressions of your eternal nature rather than fixed definitions of who you are, you become free to transform continuously without crisis or trauma. The eighth sacred key also reveals the intimate connection between conscious dying and conscious living. When you're not afraid to release aspects of yourself that no longer serve, you become much more willing to take risks, explore new possibilities, and express your authentic nature. You stop trying to protect and maintain an image and start focusing on growth and service. This freedom transforms every aspect of your experience. Your relationships become more authentic because you're not trying to maintain false personas. Your creativity explodes because you're not limiting yourself to familiar patterns. Your capacity for love expands because you're not protecting a small, separate self. Your ability to serve increases because you're not concerned with preserving your reputation or image. The masters also taught that conscious dying is ultimately about recognizing what can never die, your essential divine nature. When you stop identifying exclusively with temporary aspects of yourself, you discover the eternal consciousness that has been present through every identity you've ever worn. This recognition brings tremendous freedom and peace. You realize that you can afford to let go of anything that limits you, because your true self, pure consciousness, unlimited creative potential, divine love, can never be lost or destroyed. As you begin to work with the eighth sacred key, start by examining areas of your life where you feel stuck or resistant to necessary changes. Ask yourself, what aspect of my identity am I protecting that might actually be limiting my growth? What would I be willing to try if I wasn't so attached to maintaining my current image? Begin practicing small deaths, consciously releasing attachments to outcomes, opinions, or ways of being that no longer serve you. Notice the fear that arises when you consider letting go, and breathe compassion into that fear while continuing to practice release. Most importantly, remember that conscious dying is always in service of conscious living. You're not destroying yourself. You're removing the limitations that prevent your full expression. You're not losing who you are. You're discovering who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and protection. The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this eighth key worked synergistically with all the others. Your recognition of divine nature, first key, gives you the courage to release limited identities. Sacred breathing, second key, helps you stay present during the transformation process. Your inner temple, third key, provides a safe space for identity death and rebirth. Elevated emotions, fourth key, help you approach transformation with love rather than fear. Sacred speech, fifth key, allows you to declare new aspects of yourself as they emerge. Ancestral healing, sixth key, releases inherited patterns that might resist transformation. Energy mastery, seventh key, helps you maintain elevated frequencies during periods of uncertainty and change. The caterpillar doesn't improve itself to become a butterfly. It dissolves completely and is reformed into something entirely new. This is the gift of conscious dying, the willingness to dissolve limitations so that your divine nature can emerge in ever more beautiful expressions. Die to who you have been. Be reborn as who you are becoming. This is the sacred art that transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary expressions of divine creativity and love. The eighth sacred key has been revealed. Your transformation awaits your willingness to release what no longer serves and embrace what wants to emerge. Chapter 9. The Sacred Marriage, Uniting Heaven and Earth. The ninth sacred key, integrating spirit and matter. What if I told you that the greatest spiritual achievement isn't transcending the physical world, but rather learning to live simultaneously as an infinite spiritual being and a grounded human being? What if the ultimate mastery isn't escaping matter to find spirit, but discovering how to marry heaven and earth within your own consciousness, creating a life that is both deeply mystical and thoroughly practical? The ninth sacred key reveals one of the most profound secrets guarded by the ancient masters of Alexandria. True spiritual mastery comes not from choosing between the spiritual and material realms, but from learning to consciously unite them. becoming a bridge between infinite consciousness and finite form. This understanding challenges both religious traditions that emphasize transcending the physical world and materialistic philosophies that deny spiritual reality. The Alexandrian masters knew something that most spiritual seekers and practical achievers never discover. The highest expression of consciousness occurs when spirit and matter are not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of a unified creative process. Let me tell you about David, a man whose discovery of this sacred marriage transformed him from someone torn between spiritual aspirations and worldly responsibilities into a person who found the divine in every aspect of earthly existence. David was a successful entrepreneur who had built a thriving technology company. But despite his material success, he felt spiritually empty and disconnected from any deeper meaning or purpose. Seeking to fill this void, David began exploring various spiritual traditions, spending time in meditation retreats, studying ancient wisdom, and practicing yoga and mindfulness. Initially, these spiritual practices brought David tremendous peace and insight. He experienced profound states of consciousness, felt connected to something infinitely larger than himself, and began to understand truths about existence that transformed his perspective on life. But as David's spiritual practice deepened, he found himself increasingly conflicted about his business and worldly responsibilities. The meditation retreats taught him about detachment and non-attachment. The spiritual book spoke of transcending material concerns and finding fulfillment in spirit alone. The teachers emphasized letting go of ego desires and worldly ambitions. David began to feel that his business success and material achievements were somehow unspiritual and incompatible with his spiritual growth. This internal conflict created what David called the Great Divide, a split between his spiritual self, which sought transcendence and inner peace, and his practical self, which was engaged with business, finances, relationships, and worldly responsibilities. David felt like he was living two separate lives that couldn't be integrated. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging period when David was considering selling his company to pursue full-time spiritual practice. One evening, while in deep meditation, David had an experience that changed everything. Instead of trying to transcend his worldly concerns, he found himself bringing his spiritual awareness directly into his business challenges. As David held both his expanded consciousness and his practical responsibilities and awareness simultaneously, something extraordinary happened. He began to see his business not as a distraction from spiritual life, but as a vehicle for spiritual expression. He realized that his company wasn't separate from his spiritual path. It was his spiritual path, a unique opportunity to express divine creativity, serve others, and manifest spiritual principles in tangible form. This was David's introduction to what the Alexandrian masters called the sacred marriage, the conscious integration of spiritual awareness and practical action that creates what they considered the highest form of human expression. But this integration requires understanding and skills that neither purely spiritual nor purely material approaches provide. The masters developed sophisticated practices for what they called integrated mastery, the ability to operate simultaneously from infinite consciousness and practical wisdom, bringing spiritual principles into material form while remaining grounded in everyday reality. They knew that most people struggle with one of two imbalances. Either they become so focused on spiritual transcendence that they neglect practical responsibilities and become ineffective in the world, or they become so absorbed in material pursuits that they lose connection with deeper meaning and purpose. The ninth sacred key teaches that both imbalances represent incomplete understanding. Spirit without matter becomes abstract and impractical. Matter without spirit becomes meaningless and ultimately unsatisfying. But when spirit and matter are consciously united, they create a synergy that produces both deep fulfillment and extraordinary effectiveness in the world. Let me explain this from both practical and mystical perspectives. From a practical standpoint, integrating spiritual awareness with worldly action dramatically enhances your effectiveness in every area of life. When you bring consciousness, presence, and spiritual principles to your work, relationships, and daily activities, you tap into levels of creativity, intuition, and wisdom that aren't available through mental effort alone. Spiritual practices like meditation, mindfulness, and elevated emotional states optimize brain function, enhance decision-making capabilities, and increase your capacity for innovation and problem-solving. When you approach business challenges or relationship difficulties from a state of inner peace and expanded awareness, you naturally find solutions that aren't visible from contracted states of consciousness. From a mystical perspective, the physical world isn't separate from spiritual reality. It's spiritual reality expressing itself in form. Every business transaction, every conversation, every mundane task is an opportunity for consciousness to know itself through experience. When you recognize matter as spirit in disguise, every worldly activity becomes a spiritual practice. The masters taught that this recognition transforms both your spiritual life and your practical life. Your spiritual practice becomes more grounded and applicable, while your worldly activities become infused with meaning and purpose. You stop compartmentalizing your existence into spiritual time and practical time, and start living from integrated awareness that sees the sacred in every moment. Now let me tell you how David applied this understanding to create what he called his integrated life. Once he recognized that his business could be an expression of his spiritual values rather than a distraction from them, David began consciously bringing his spiritual practices into his work environment. David started each workday with a brief meditation, not to escape from business concerns, but to bring elevated consciousness to whatever challenges the day might present. He began approaching business decisions from a state of inner peace and expanded awareness, asking not just what will be most profitable, but what will serve the highest good of all involved. David transformed his company meetings by beginning each one with a moment of silence for clarity and wisdom. He started making hiring decisions based not just on technical qualifications, but on whether potential employees shared values of integrity, service, and growth. He began viewing his customers not as sources of revenue, but as souls he was privileged to serve through his products and services. Most remarkably, David discovered that bringing spiritual awareness to his business dramatically improved both its financial performance and its positive impact. When he operated from consciousness rather than ego, he made better strategic decisions. When he approached negotiations from love rather than fear, he created win-win outcomes that built lasting relationships. When he viewed his work as service rather than just profit-seeking, he attracted customers and employees who shared those values. Within 2 years, David's company had not only grown significantly, but had become known in the industry for its ethical practices, innovative solutions, and positive workplace culture. David realized that he hadn't sacrificed material success for spiritual values. He had discovered that spiritual values, when authentically applied, enhance material success while making it meaningful. But the integration went deeper than just business practices. David began to see every aspect of his life as an opportunity for spiritual expression. His relationships became vehicles for practicing unconditional love. His financial decisions became exercises in abundance consciousness. His health practices became expressions of reverence for the body as a temple of spirit. Even mundane activities like grocery shopping or household chores became opportunities for mindfulness and presence. David discovered that enlightenment wasn't found by escaping ordinary life, but by bringing extraordinary consciousness to ordinary activities. This is the essence of the sacred marriage, recognizing that there is no separation between the spiritual and material realms. There are only different levels of consciousness with which you can approach any experience. The masters of Alexandria identified several principles for achieving this integration. First, seeing spirit in matter. Instead of viewing the physical world as somehow less spiritual than invisible realms, you learn to recognize matter as concentrated consciousness. Your body, your work, your relationships, and your material circumstances all become expressions of spirit, seeking to know itself through form. Second, bringing consciousness to form. Rather than compartmentalizing spiritual practice into specific times and places, you learn to bring meditative awareness, loving presence, and spiritual principles to every activity and interaction. Third, serving through structure. You recognize that spiritual service often requires practical skills, material resources, and worldly effectiveness. Building businesses, raising families, creating art, or engaging in any constructive activity becomes a way of serving the divine through tangible contribution. Fourth, finding purpose in practicality. You discover that mundane responsibilities and everyday challenges are not obstacles to spiritual growth, but opportunities for spiritual expression. Every problem becomes a chance to practice love. Every difficulty becomes an invitation to develop wisdom. Let me share another example that illustrates these principles. Elena was a physician who had entered medicine with genuine desire to heal and serve others. But after years of practice within a healthcare system focused primarily on profit and efficiency, she felt disconnected from her original calling. The demands of insurance requirements, administrative tasks, and time pressures had gradually transformed her healing vocation into what felt like a job. Elena's spiritual seeking began as an escape from professional dissatisfaction. She started attending meditation retreats, studying Eastern philosophy, and practicing energy healing modalities. These experiences brought her tremendous insight and peace, but they also created a growing sense that her medical practice was somehow unspiritual and incompatible with her spiritual values. Working with the ninth sacred key, Elena began to see her medical practice not as separate from her spiritual path, but as its perfect expression. Instead of viewing the healthcare system as an obstacle to authentic healing, she began to see it as an opportunity to bring spiritual principles to places they were desperately needed. Elena started incorporating brief mindfulness practices into her patient interactions, taking a moment to center herself before entering each examination room. She began listening to patients not just for physical symptoms but for the emotional and spiritual dimensions of their health challenges. She started viewing each patient as a soul having a human experience, rather than just a collection of symptoms to diagnose. Elena discovered that when she brought spiritual presence to her medical practice, her diagnostic abilities actually improved. Patients felt more heard and understood, which helped them open up about symptoms and concerns they might otherwise have hidden. Her intuitive insights often led to more accurate diagnoses and more effective treatment plans. But Elena's integration went beyond individual patient care. She began advocating within her healthcare system for policies that honored the whole person rather than just treating diseases. She started a meditation program for staff to help reduce burnout and increase job satisfaction. She developed protocols that included emotional and spiritual support as part of comprehensive patient care. Elena discovered that bringing spirituality to medicine didn't make her less effective as a physician. It made her more effective. Her patients experienced better outcomes. Her job satisfaction increased dramatically, and she became a catalyst for positive change within her healthcare organization. The sacred marriage doesn't require changing your external circumstances. It requires changing your internal approach to those circumstances. Elena didn't leave medicine to find spirituality. She brought spirituality to medicine and discovered that both were enhanced by the integration. The masters taught that the sacred marriage creates what they called enlightened effectiveness, the ability to be both deeply spiritual and highly practical, both transcendently aware and thoroughly grounded. This integration produces individuals who can access infinite consciousness while remaining completely functional in finite form. These integrated masters often become what the ancients called bodhisattvas, beings who have achieved spiritual awakening but choose to remain engaged with the world to serve others' awakening. They understand that true spiritual mastery isn't demonstrated by withdrawal from the world, but by transforming the world through conscious engagement. The sacred marriage also resolves many of the conflicts that plague both spiritual seekers and worldly achievers. Spiritual seekers often struggle with guilt about material desires or practical ambitions, while worldly achievers often feel empty despite external success. The ninth sacred key reveals that these conflicts arise from false separation between spirit and matter. When you recognize that spirit seeks to express itself through matter, material success becomes a natural byproduct of spiritual alignment, rather than something that conflicts with it. When you understand that consciousness wants to create and contribute through form, worldly engagement becomes a spiritual practice, rather than a distraction from it. This integration also enhances both your spiritual development and your practical effectiveness. Your spiritual practices become more grounded and applicable when they're connected to real-world service. Your worldly activities become more fulfilling and successful when they're aligned with spiritual principles and higher purpose. The masters identified several signs of successful sacred marriage, Effortless integration. You no longer experience conflict between spiritual values and practical responsibilities. Your spiritual principles naturally inform your worldly decisions, while your worldly experiences deepen your spiritual understanding. Enhanced effectiveness. Your practical abilities improve when approached from spiritual consciousness. You make better decisions, create more harmonious relationships, and achieve results that benefit everyone involved. Continuous service. Your life becomes an ongoing expression of service, whether through formal spiritual work or through bringing consciousness to whatever work you do. Every activity becomes an opportunity to contribute to the greater good. Joyful engagement. You find deep satisfaction in both spiritual practice and worldly activities. Meditation brings you peace and insight, while practical work brings you joy and fulfillment. Both become expressions of your essential nature. Natural leadership. Others are naturally drawn to your integrated approach and seek to learn from your example. You become a bridge between different worlds, helping others find their own path to integration. As you begin working with the 9th sacred key, examine areas of your life where you experience conflict between spiritual values and practical demands. Ask yourself, how can I bring more consciousness to this activity? What would it look like to approach this responsibility as a spiritual practice? Begin looking for opportunities to serve the divine through your existing roles and responsibilities, rather than seeking spiritual fulfillment outside of them. Practice bringing meditative awareness, loving presence, and spiritual principles to your work, relationships, and daily activities. Most importantly, remember that the sacred marriage isn't a destination but an ongoing practice. You're not trying to achieve a perfect balance between spirit and matter. You're learning to recognize that there was never any separation to balance in the first place. The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this 9th key represented the culmination of all the previous keys working in harmony. Your recognition of divine nature, 1st key, provides the foundation for seeing spirit in everything. Sacred breathing, 2nd key, helps you maintain spiritual awareness during practical activities. Your inner temple, 3rd key, becomes a space where spiritual and material planning unite. Elevated emotions, 4th key, infuse your worldly activities with spiritual energy. Sacred speech, 5th key, allows you to speak spiritual truth through practical communication. Ancestral healing, 6th key, clears patterns that create false separation between spirit and matter. Energy mastery, 7th key, helps you maintain elevated frequency during worldly engagement. Conscious dying, 8th key, releases attachments that prevent full integration. You are not a spiritual being trying to transcend the material world, nor are you a material being trying to find spiritual meaning. You are consciousness itself, equally at home in infinite awareness and finite form, equally capable of mystical experience and practical achievement. The sacred marriage awaits your recognition that heaven and earth were never separate. They are one reality expressing itself through the magnificent dance of spirit and matter that is your life. Marry heaven and earth within yourself. Live as both infinite consciousness and practical wisdom. This is the path of the integrated master, and it is your birthright. The 9th sacred key has been revealed. Your integrated mastery begins now. Chapter 10. The Guardian of the New Earth. The 10th sacred key. Becoming a bearer of new consciousness. What if I told you that your personal transformation isn't just about improving your own life, but about fulfilling a sacred contract you made before incarnating on Earth? What if your awakening to these 10 sacred keys isn't a coincidence, but rather your soul's response to a planetary call for consciousness that is reshaping the very fabric of human experience? The 10th and final sacred key reveals the ultimate purpose behind all your spiritual growth and personal development. You are not just healing and transforming yourself. You are serving as an agent of evolution for all humanity, helping to birth a new level of consciousness on Earth. This understanding transforms everything about your spiritual journey. You're not just a seeker trying to improve your personal circumstances. You're not just an individual working through your own limitations and patterns. You are a conscious participant in the greatest transformation in human history, the emergence of what the ancient masters of Alexandria called the New Earth consciousness. Let me tell you about Sarah, a woman whose recognition of this sacred purpose transformed her from someone working on herself into someone working for the elevation of all humanity through her own awakening. Sarah had spent years applying the sacred keys with remarkable success. She had transformed her health, her relationships, her career, and her overall life experience in ways that seemed miraculous to those who knew her journey. But as Sarah's personal transformation reached a certain level of mastery, she began experiencing something unexpected, a deep restlessness that had nothing to do with her personal circumstances. Despite living a life that was more fulfilling, abundant, and joyful than she had ever imagined possible, Sarah felt a calling that extended far beyond her individual experience. She began to sense that her personal awakening was preparing her for something larger, something that involved serving humanity's collective evolution in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. This restlessness intensified as Sarah noticed something remarkable happening around her. Without any effort on her part, people began seeking her out for guidance and support. Friends, family members, colleagues, and even strangers seemed naturally drawn to her presence and wanted to understand what had changed about her and how they could experience similar transformation. Sarah realized that her personal mastery of the sacred keys had created something beyond individual benefit. It had made her into what she called a frequency anchor for elevated consciousness. Her very presence seemed to remind others of possibilities they had forgotten, to activate dormant potentials within them, and to create space for their own awakening to unfold. This was Sarah's introduction to what the Alexandrian masters knew. When you reach a certain level of consciousness integration, you automatically become a catalyst for awakening in others, not through what you do, but through who you have become. But this recognition brought with it a profound responsibility and a choice. Sarah could continue using her mastery of the sacred keys primarily for personal benefit, or she could consciously step into what the masters called planetary service, dedicating her awakened consciousness to serving the evolution of human consciousness itself. The choice wasn't between selfishness and selflessness. Sarah's personal well-being and continued growth remained important. Rather, it was between a purely individual focus and a recognition that her individual awakening was part of a much larger awakening that was seeking to express itself through millions of conscious individuals across the planet. The 10th sacred key reveals that this choice eventually comes to everyone who seriously applies the previous 9 keys. At a certain point in your transformation, you recognize that your personal awakening is inseparable from humanity's collective awakening, and you're called to serve this larger purpose through your unique gifts and expression. This calling isn't about becoming a formal spiritual teacher or starting a healing practice, though some may be called to those expressions. The 10th sacred key reveals that every awakened individual serves the new earth consciousness simply by embodying it consistently in their daily life, regardless of their profession or circumstances. Let me explain what the masters meant by new earth consciousness and why they considered it the ultimate purpose of all spiritual development. Throughout human history, the dominant mode of consciousness has been based on separation, competition, scarcity, and fear. This consciousness has driven tremendous technological advancement and cultural development, but it has also created enormous suffering, conflict, and environmental destruction. The masters of Alexandria foresaw a time when humanity would reach a critical point where the old consciousness of separation would become unsustainable, and a new consciousness based on unity, collaboration, abundance, and love would begin to emerge. They knew that this transition wouldn't happen through external changes alone, but through individuals who had developed sufficient inner mastery to embody the new consciousness, even while living within systems based on the old consciousness. These individuals, what the masters called New Earth Guardians, would serve as bridges between the old and new paradigms, demonstrating through their lived experience that another way of being human was not only possible, but more fulfilling, effective, and sustainable than the old patterns. Modern science is validating what the masters knew intuitively. Research in fields like quantum physics, consciousness studies, and systems theory suggests that humanity is indeed approaching a phase transition, a fundamental shift in how human consciousness operates. This shift is being driven by both external pressures, environmental crisis, technological acceleration, global interconnection, and internal awakening, increasing numbers of people experiencing expanded consciousness and seeking more meaningful ways of living. But phase transitions in complex systems don't happen gradually. They occur when a critical mass of elements within the system reach a new level of organization. In terms of human consciousness, this means that the new Earth doesn't emerge when everyone awakens, but when enough individuals embody new consciousness to tip the entire system into a new configuration. This is why your personal transformation matters so profoundly. Every individual who masters the sacred keys and embodies elevated consciousness contributes to reaching this critical mass. Your awakening isn't just personal. It's planetary service. Now let me tell you how Sarah stepped consciously into her role as a new Earth Guardian, and the remarkable effects that followed. Once Sarah recognized that her personal transformation was part of a larger planetary awakening, she began approaching her daily life with a different intention. Instead of just maintaining her own elevated states, she began consciously holding space for others to access those same states. Sarah started what she called consciousness seeding, deliberately bringing her mastery of the sacred keys into every environment and interaction. Not to teach or preach, but to create energetic fields that made awakening more accessible for others. When she entered her workplace, she would silently anchor frequencies of peace, creativity, and collaboration. When she encountered people in stress or conflict, she would maintain inner states of love and wisdom that often helped others naturally shift into more harmonious responses. Most remarkably, Sarah began experiencing what she called spontaneous service opportunities, situations where her presence and consciousness could serve others' awakening without any effort or planning on her part. A conversation with a cashier would unexpectedly become a moment of healing for that person. A work meeting would transform into a collaborative breakthrough because of the elevated consciousness she brought to it. Even her presence in public spaces seemed to create subtle but noticeable shifts toward more kindness and connection among strangers. Sarah discovered that being a new Earth Guardian didn't require changing her external life dramatically. It required bringing new consciousness to whatever life she was already living. Her job remained the same, but her approach to it became a form of service. Her relationships remained the same, but they became vehicles for demonstrating new possibilities for human connection. Her daily activities remained the same, but they became opportunities to anchor elevated consciousness in ordinary situations. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Sarah's experience as a new Earth Guardian was the sense of purpose and meaning it brought to every aspect of her life. She no longer felt like she was just living for personal fulfillment. She felt like she was participating in the most important work possible, helping humanity evolve into its next stage of development. The Masters taught that new Earth Guardians could be recognized by several key characteristics. Embodied mastery. They have integrated the sacred keys to the point where elevated consciousness is their natural state, rather than something they have to work to maintain. They don't just practice love, gratitude, and wisdom. They are expressions of these qualities. Effortless service. Their service to collective awakening happens naturally through their presence and being, rather than through forced effort or missionary zeal. They serve by example rather than by preaching. Systemic thinking. They understand that individual transformation and collective transformation are inseparable. They see their personal growth as contributing to planetary evolution and their service to others as supporting their own continued development. Grounded mysticism. They have achieved the sacred marriage of spirit and matter, functioning effectively in practical reality, while maintaining connection to infinite consciousness. They are equally comfortable with mystical experiences and mundane responsibilities. Radiant stability. They maintain inner peace and elevated consciousness even in chaotic or challenging environments. Their stability provides an anchor that helps others access their own inner calm and wisdom. Natural leadership. Others are naturally drawn to them not because they promote themselves, but because their consciousness creates space for others to experience their own highest potential. They lead through inspiration rather than authority. The 10th sacred key also reveals that new Earth Guardians often work in what the Masters called stealth mode, serving the evolution of consciousness through their regular roles and relationships, rather than through obviously spiritual activities. A guardian might be a teacher who creates learning environments that help students discover their own wisdom. A business leader who demonstrates that success can be achieved through collaboration rather than competition. A parent who raises children with consciousness that breaks generational patterns, or a healthcare worker who brings healing presence to their service. Let me share another example that illustrates this principle. Marcus was an engineer who had applied the sacred keys to transform his relationship with his technically demanding work. As Marcus embodied higher consciousness, he began approaching engineering challenges not just as technical problems, but as opportunities to serve the greater good through innovative solutions. Marcus started bringing spiritual principles to his engineering practice, seeking solutions that served environmental sustainability, considering the long-term impact of his designs on human well-being, and collaborating with colleagues from a consciousness of mutual support rather than competition. He began viewing his engineering work as a form of service to planetary healing rather than just a job. The effects were remarkable. Marcus's teams became more creative and collaborative, producing innovative solutions that weren't emerging in other departments. His projects began receiving recognition for their environmental consciousness and positive social impact. Most importantly, Marcus discovered that approaching engineering from elevated consciousness actually enhanced his technical abilities. He found solutions that weren't visible from contracted states of awareness. But Marcus's greatest contribution as a New Earth Guardian was inspiring other engineers to see their work as service to planetary well-being. Through his example, Marcus helped shift the consciousness of his entire department from purely technical focus to what they called conscious engineering. Technical excellence in service of ecological and social harmony. Marcus demonstrated that you don't need to leave your profession to serve the New Earth. You can transform your profession into an expression of New Earth consciousness. The Masters taught that the emergence of New Earth consciousness would be characterized by several key shifts, from competition to collaboration. Instead of seeing others as competitors to be defeated, awakened individuals naturally seek win-win solutions that benefit everyone involved. From scarcity to abundance. Instead of operating from fear that there isn't enough to go around, New Earth consciousness recognizes infinite creative potential and seeks to generate value for all. From separation to unity. Instead of seeing themselves as isolated individuals struggling alone, awakened beings recognize their interconnection with all life and act from this understanding. From fear to love. Instead of making decisions primarily to avoid negative outcomes, New Earth consciousness chooses actions based on love, service, and positive vision. From ego to service. Instead of asking what's in it for me, awakened individuals naturally ask, how can I serve the highest good of all? These shifts don't happen through willpower or forcing yourself to be different. They emerge naturally as the integration of the sacred keys transforms your consciousness from the inside out. The 10th sacred key also reveals something profound about the timing of this planetary awakening. The Masters knew that the emergence of New Earth consciousness would coincide with a period of apparent crisis and breakdown in the old systems. What might appear as chaos and destruction is actually the natural process of an old paradigm dissolving to make space for a new one to emerge. This understanding helps New Earth Guardians maintain perspective and stability during turbulent times. Instead of being overwhelmed by global challenges, they recognize these challenges as birth pangs of a new level of human consciousness. Instead of falling into despair about the state of the world, they focus on embodying the solutions through their own transformation and service. As you recognize your calling as a New Earth Guardian, remember that this isn't a burden or obligation imposed from outside. It's the natural expression of your soul's deepest purpose. You incarnated at this time specifically to participate in this planetary awakening. Your personal challenges, your spiritual seeking, and your mastery of the sacred keys have all been preparing you for this moment of conscious service. Your service doesn't require perfection or complete mastery of all the keys. It simply requires your willingness to embody whatever level of consciousness you've achieved and to continue growing in service to the collective awakening. The ancient keepers of Alexandria knew that this 10th key represents the full flowering of all the previous keys, working in complete integration. Your recognition of divine nature, first key, provides the foundation for serving others awakening. Sacred breathing, second key, helps you maintain elevated states while serving in challenging environments. Your inner temple, third key, becomes a space where you can receive guidance for your service. Elevated emotions, fourth key, provide the energetic frequency that most effectively supports others' transformation. Sacred speech, fifth key, allows you to communicate truth in ways that inspire rather than threaten. Ancestral healing, sixth key, ensures that your service isn't contaminated by unresolved patterns. Energy mastery, seventh key, enables you to maintain your frequency regardless of external circumstances. Conscious dying, eighth key, keeps you from getting attached to specific forms your service must take. Sacred marriage, ninth key, allows you to serve through whatever practical roles life has given you. As you step fully into your role as a New Earth Guardian, trust that you will be guided to exactly the right forms of service for your unique gifts and circumstances. Your service might be quiet and invisible or public and recognized. It might involve working with individuals or contributing to systemic change. It might express through art, business, healing, education, parenting, or any other authentic expression of your awakened consciousness. What matters isn't the form your service takes. What matters is the consciousness you bring to whatever you do. Every moment you spend in elevated awareness, every interaction you approach from love rather than fear, every decision you make from wisdom rather than reactivity, contributes to the critical mass needed for planetary awakening. You are not just transforming your own life. You are participating in the transformation of human consciousness itself. You are not just healing your own patterns. You are helping to heal the collective patterns that have limited humanity for millennia. You are not just awakening to your own divine nature. You are helping awaken the divine nature of our entire species. This is the ultimate purpose revealed by the 10 sacred keys of Alexandria, to transform individuals who can transform the world through their very being. The ancient keepers of these mysteries knew that this time would come, when enough souls would awaken to tip the entire planet into a new level of consciousness. That time is now. Those souls are awakening everywhere. You are one of them. Welcome, Guardian of the New Earth. Your awakening has prepared you for this moment. Your mastery of the sacred keys has equipped you for this service. Your very presence is helping birth a new reality for all humanity. The 10 sacred keys have been revealed. The transformation is complete. The service begins now. Hold the frequency. Anchor the light. Embody the love. And watch as heaven truly descends to earth through the collective awakening of souls like you who remember why they came here and what they came to do. The new earth is not coming. It is here, expressing itself through every awakened heart, every conscious choice, every moment of love in action. You are the new earth. Live like it. Serve like it. Love like it. The greatest adventure in human history has begun, and you are both its author and its hero. The sacred keys have been revealed. The Guardian awakens, the new earth is born.